Evening, everyone. My name is Papa Ja. I'm founder and executive director of the African Leadership Group. Welcome to the 5th annual Afrik Impact. This year, the kickoff of the Afrik Impact will be different and unusual because something unusual has happened in our community. There's a place we call home, and we all feel like when we are home, we should be safe. We shouldn't have much to worry about. But unfortunately, on August 6th, we have 5 members of our community that perish on a house fire. We had Jibril Jal, her husband, a father, an engineer that somebody loved, his wife that just got here 8 months ago, and the baby girl that's a toddler, and Jibi's sister that came to visit 2 months ago, and her 8-month-old baby, all perish in a house fire. To make the matter worse, this was identified as a homicide, meaning somebody deliberately set the house on fire to take their life. And the best thing we can do at the kickoff of Afrik Impact is to honor that family and have a moment of silence. And wherever you are, from your heart, from your soul, just express some prayers, some thought to that family. May God bless them and welcome to his paradise. So we'll do a moment of silence for the Jol family. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to the 5th annual Afrik Impact. Papa, founder and executive director of the African Leadership Group. It's truly an honor to have all of you here. And we are at the Denver Botanic Garden, and I just wanted to go over some housekeeping rules for people that are here in person and people that are following us online. If you are following us online, just know that you will be muted throughout the presentation, and you will have the opportunity to chat in your question. Panelists, we have 2 panels that's going to be participating, and they will be sitting and be facing on the camera. So if you are following us on Facebook Live also, you will be able to chat in your question, and the team will get it to me. About the African Leadership Group, it's been started 17 years ago with the mission to help facilitate the professional integration of African immigrants, social impact, economic impact, and educational impact. As immigrants coming from Africa, we all know sometimes it can be very challenging to be fully integrated in a society, especially if a society where you don't speak the language, you don't understand the culture, it can be challenging. We consider ourselves citizens of the United States. We consider ourselves active members of the community that we live in. We want to give back, we want to be part of the society. And that's the concept of Afrik Impact, as the word, Afrik Impact. We want to celebrate loudly and proudly the impact we have in the state of Colorado as African immigrants. But we also know that we cannot do this alone. We got to do this with people we call friends, partners, brothers and sisters. That's what led us to the Denver Botanic Garden. That's what led us to some of the panelists and speakers that we have. The Colorado community is a great community. It's a united community where we speak in one voice. And as the theme of Afrik Impact this year, if you look at it, that's the value in our common voice. Everybody can tell that we are faced with a challenging year. 2020 has been extremely difficult. Everything has changed in our life. The way we dress, the way we work together, everything has changed. But as member of the African Leadership Group, we wanted to play our part on how do we build this community? How do we rise up from these challenges? That's why we couldn't pick a better theme than the value in our common voice. And you will see it throughout the week, from presentation to presentation, all we're gonna be doing is talking in common voice, being able to identify the challenges and opportunity, being able to express them to elected officials, to leaders, and hoping that they will come with solutions, and together we'll build a better community. Thank you for being here. There's no other way to start the program other than having somebody I call a mentor, a friend of mine that really gave us the key to the Denver Botanic Garden. This is a place we call home. Because of his friendship and his partnership and collaboration, a lot of members of our community had the chance to visit the Denver Botanic Garden. And my friend, let me tell you, where we are having the event, we are the inaugural organization that's having the first event in this brand new facility. Help me welcome my friend, my mentor, Brian Brooks. Thank you, Brian.
Papa, I actually see you as one of my mentors and definitely one of my heroes. It has been an extraordinary journey that we've had together over the last number of years. I am so honored that you chose to come back to the Botanic Gardens for this incredible event. The work has substance, the work has meaning, and the work has common voice, as you say. Everything in our world today is in crisis. That's what it feels like, doesn't it? It feels like we have an economic crisis, a public health crisis, a social and racial justice crisis, political crisis. It just seems so overwhelming and large. But more deeply, it begins to find root in our own communities, in our own neighborhoods, in our own souls. And when that happens, we have a couple of choices. We can just hunker down and try and shy away from the world, or we can rise up and do something about it. And this is an organization that I have admired so much because you work so hard to improve the lives of the people in your community. And Denver Botanic Gardens is an asset that we want to turn over to you as much as we possibly can, because what we have discovered is that in times like this, people seek out a connection to Mother Earth. They try to find a place in nature that gives them balance deep in the core of their souls. And so I hope that the people that are here today and are here Thursday will take some time to wander the gardens. I hope that on Saturday evening we have a wonderful community celebration out in the gardens with music and healing, really an evening of healing. But most of all, we just feel very bonded with ALG and the entire community. And it's always a joy when we begin to work on a project together. Lori Collier is a one-woman wonder. She has, give her a hand, she is amazing. How she balances the logistics that she does requires that she sleep not at all. And so I think next week you're going to take about a 5-day nap, aren't you? You're well-deserved, well-deserved. But more than anything else, I just wanted to tell you, you are so welcome here. We are so honored that ALG is the first group of the public that have actually been in the Frere Newman Center for an event. Let's keep doing it year after year, and let's make the world better. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I told you he was a friend and a mentor, and thank you so much for your leadership. Now, we are here this morning for a very, very important topic when it comes to the education of our children. And I'm very excited about this forum because of the panelists we have and the speakers. When we come up with a theme, the value in our common voice, we wanted to make sure when we get together to have a conversation, every single member of the community is represented. What a better way to start with Mike Miles. Also, I like to say that I'm smart enough that whenever I see great people, I call them a mentor, and I seek for their expertise and their knowledge. And Mike is one of a mentor of Mike. So Mike is the founder and CEO of Third Future School, a network of high-quality public school in Colorado and Texas, working to prepare students for a year 2030 workplace. For a year 2030 workplace. That's a vision right there. Prior to his latest work, Mike served 3 years as superintendent of the Dallas Independent School District and 6 years as the superintendent of the Harrison School District in Colorado Springs. Under his leadership, both districts implemented groundbreaking initiatives, established a high-performance culture, and experienced significant growth in students. Mike is one of those people, when you try to read his bio, it feels like reading a book because he has done so much. So my friends, community members, please help me welcome Mike Miles. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Papa, and thank you, African Leadership Group, for holding this important forum today. This is the right time, and it's the right subject. It is critically important because we have a once-in-a-100-year event, a once-in-a-100-year challenge. With that challenge, of course, is a once-in-a-100-year opportunity. But let's talk today, and I'm happy to lead this off, but you're going to have great speakers and panelists to really get into this subject of education during a time of COVID, but also, more important, is after COVID, and what are we going to do for our children. So happy to do that, and I hope today that we will have some honest, open, transparent, and frankly tough discussions, because that's what you need during a time like this. So let me start, and hopefully I won't be too controversial, but I'm okay with that if it comes to that. So let me ask you the first tough question. How essential are we? I want everybody to think about that, people online, people in the audience. How essential is education? Now, I'm not trying to be facetious here. That's a tough question, because if you answer it, we are truly essential, then that means a certain set of actions that we have to take. And I think we're terribly essential. I mean, nurses and doctors and the medical profession, they're probably the most essential right now. And because they are highly essential, they are operating. Nobody would say, you know, close the hospitals. Nurses and doctors have had elevated risks to their own health, but most of them are going to work, trying to figure it out, and protecting the public interests. They're doing it in as safe a manner as possible. After nurses and doctors, probably you might argue that EMTs, first responders, are essential. And they are too going to work. They're trying to do it as safe as possible, but they are headed to work. I would put us as a close second or third for being an essential organization. Essential to the health of our kids, essential to the economy, and most important, essential to a good future for all kids. So if we are that essential, and I think we are, what are we going to do about that? And can we find a way to have school and educate kids even during this time? The opportunity gap is growing. We know that before COVID, right? Before COVID-19, we had an achievement gap, we had an opportunity gap, and all of us who were in this field were trying to close or narrow that gap. We as an institution, public education, have not been doing a good job with that, right? The achievement gap, the opportunity gap before COVID has been huge and not narrowing fast enough. We are going to get to the year 2030 with over half of our students not being able to read at grade level or do math at grade level. That was the trend line we were on. The other thing we're not doing well is preparing kids for year 2030 workplace and world. Now with COVID-19, we see the future is coming even faster. Jobs are being lost even faster. And are our students ready for that year 2030 workplace? And what is our role in that? Can we afford to take a year off? Can we afford to say, you know, sorry, Mr. Miles, COVID-19 has struck and it's all we can do, but we're not going to be able to really do anything about achievement. It's all we can do just to get the kids in school in a safe way. Is that our answer? That's how essential we are? We have a school out in Midland, Texas that just opened up on the 5th of August like our other schools, in-person learning. And the community there is not, the community spread and the transmission of disease is not as high as in Houston or other parts of Texas. It's higher than Colorado, so we might have done something if we were in Florida or Houston. But in Midland, we were able to go to school with safety parameters, but we were asked by several people not to go to school, not to do in-person learning. And my team and I said, well, are we essential? I mean, how essential are we? Because, you know, Walmart's open. So are we less essential than Walmart? The restaurants are open. Now they're at 50% capacity. So why can't we open the schools at 50% capacity? Meaning we spread out 6 feet distant. We have all the masks on. We have safety requirements. So you don't want us to go to school because I guess we're not as essential as the restaurants or liquor stores. No, we are essential. And so if we are essential, and I think the answer is definitely yes, the second question is, what is the level of risk that we would be able to tolerate? We are not in a normal situation. We are in a 100-year event. We are in an event like the Depression, like the World War. That's how critical it is. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, and we will either stand up and help our kids or not. And that means we have to tolerate a certain amount of risk. I'm not saying go to school without any safety precautions. But I had a teacher, I hear the conversations across the nation, and we have to be able to accept a certain amount of risk. What does that mean? It means that we can go to school, be socially distant, have cohorts. It doesn't mean that no one will get sick. But if you're unwilling to tolerate even one person getting sick in a school, then you might as well close the school. You might as well stay home. And you might as well say we're actually not that essential. Again, I'm not advocating for going back to school without health precautions. We're doing that now. We're wearing masks, we're being 6 foot distant and all that. I'm advocating for thinking of different ways so that kids still get a great education. You know what wealthy families are doing right now? Wealthy families are people with means. They're forming these pods, right? 6 or 7 or 8 families get together, You've heard this on the news, right? 6, 7, 8 families get together, they hire a teacher or two, and they are running their own school in a pod in their community. Well, that's great. That's a great idea. They are doing what they need to do for their kids. Frankly, if I had kids in school and the school district or school system wasn't doing anything for my child except for remote learning, asynchronous remote learning, I would probably form a pod too. So the question then is, again, what are we doing for all kids, especially poor and minority students, students who are challenged by poverty, students whose parents can't afford a pod or a tutor, which is also skyrocketing, by the way, tutors and paying for tutors. Reminds me of a movie scene from Interstellar. Matthew McConaughey was trying to dock his spaceship with a space station that had been disabled and was falling towards the planet. And the computer told him, you know, it's impossible to dock. And he said, no, it's necessary. So for my network, that's the theme this year. It's not impossible, it's necessary. So what can we do? Is it possible? About 3 months ago, I read in Education Week that the head of the Massachusetts Association of Teachers, and I don't have anything against them in particular, I'm just quoting the head of that, who said, it is impossible to teach students in person and remotely at the same time. Meanwhile, we had already made plans to teach in person and remotely at the same time. How many minutes do I have left? I'm good? Okay. And that's what we're doing now. We're doing simultaneous teaching, and we've been perfecting that. We're actually in our 9th week of that. We had 6 weeks of summer school in person at 2 schools, and we're now in our going on our 3rd week in person with remote learners online, kind of almost very similar to what Papa and your group is doing right now, right? If I were teaching remotely, in person, this group, I would also be engaging people online, and that's what the teacher is doing, simultaneous teaching. So it can be done. What to do, real quick. We got to start with being honest with teachers, honest with our communities. We have to have those tough conversations. How essential are we? And teachers, we love teachers. We understand that this is a once in a 100-year event, and nobody signed up to be a teacher in the COVID era. So what we did for our teachers, we said, look, you didn't sign up for this, we get it. So if you want to take a leave of absence without pay, and we will pay for your health care, anybody in our network can do that. Only one teacher took us up on it, but we were prepared for 20 or 30 teachers to do that. Leave of absence without pay, we pay for your health care, you can stay home for 1 year. However, let's be honest, this is not a normal time. And everybody has their own risk calculation, right? Your own analysis of risk. So you choose what's good for you, but the system has got to do what's good for kids. So if for you, teacher, I'm sorry that COVID happened, but if you want to teach in the year 2021, this is what it means to teach in the year 2021. If you are so afraid for your own safety, then please take advantage of a year of absence without pay, or make a choice that's good for you. We have got to make choices that are good for all kids. Finally, we need to plan now, we educators need to plan now for a post-COVID world. And a lot of discussion today will be about that. And we should plan on not returning to normal. Most important, we need to plan now for systemic changes to fight inequity. The inequities inherent in our system were revealed and placed into stark relief by the COVID-19. We knew it before COVID-19, right? All of us. now we know even more how urgent a situation this is. There's a couple things you can do. I'll just tell you one, and I've been preaching this for a long time, but one of the things you need to do is not just ask for more resources, even though resources matter. It's not a matter of just giving kids without Chromebooks or internet access a hotspot, while that's important too. One of the things you need to do systemically after COVID, everybody, principals, superintendents, place your most effective teachers with the least proficient students. That's just one thing you can do. And that doesn't cost a whole bunch of money, but it does cost you to change the system so that all of our kids get a high quality education. It's going to require, and let me close, leadership and courage to do even that, and many other things that we have to do post-COVID. And I hope you talk about leadership and courage today, because I know it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for principals and superintendents in particular to really address systemic inequities in our system. And not everybody's going to be happy about that. But if we get to our destination still standing, knowing in our hearts what it really took, without fanfare or reward, we'll look across the way to each other and say, simply, well done. Thanks for your time today, folks. I think we might have questions.
Yes, we might have questions. Thank you so much, Mike. And we have a lot of questions that came through online, but if you are in the audience and you have questions, please raise your hand, and Dr. Ann and Laurie might walk the mic to you. But also, I know I've been getting questions also online. So the first one I have here, Mike, is how do we balance safety and compulsory educational requirement in the absence of clear guidance from government official?
Yeah, that's a great question. And here's what I think. One, we look at the health requirements. So we read the CDC reports, we read the safety guidelines from Tri-County Health, and also the Collier Department of Health. CDE also is working with them. So we look at the facts related to that, and we look at those guidelines. And so we try to follow those as close as we can. We don't pay too much attention to the politics. We look at the facts, and we try to do what's safe for our kids. So it's pretty clear that if you are socially distant, if you're wearing masks, if you have wash your hands constantly, have hand sanitizers, gloves, shields, all of that, you can go to school safely. In fact, the Colorado guidelines say that right now, kids in kindergarten through 5th grade can actually return to school in normal class sizes. Now, we're not doing that. We have fewer kids in our K-1, and then in our 3rd grade through 8th grade, they're socially distanced, meaning about 6 feet between desks. So we only have about 12 desks in a classroom.
Thank you, Mike. Question in the audience? Yes, Max.
Thank you, Mr. Mike, and thank you, ALG, for hosting Afrik Impacts with a challenging time right now. But my question is, since you have said that rich people are having a part to get teachers for the families, why can't we go by getting a part of student, like a college student, to help the kids who cannot afford to have a part, the teachers?
Yeah, so yeah, people with means is what I meant. People with means are, many of them are forming pods or getting tutors. And these are, and let me reiterate, these are good things for their kids, right? And if you need to do what you need to do for your kids, and if you had the means, I wouldn't blame you. At the same time, your question is the appropriate one. Why can't we have pods? Well, we're having pods in our school. We have cohorts. So groups of 12 kids, 3rd graders, in one cohort. So if one child gets sick, that cohort goes home, is quarantined, but not the whole school. So that's kind of like a pod. Can colleges do something like that? My son just went back to the University of Miami, and they are trying to do very similar things. Now, it's a little bit different situation. So they have a whole dorm floor is one cohort, but they have a lecture hall like this with everybody spread out. I know people online may not be able to see, but everybody is spread out more than 6 feet apart, which is great. So that's what they're trying to do too. But I think our cohort in our school is like a pod.
Thank you. And Jason?
Thank you, Mike, for your address. And a quick question for you. Speaking from your experience as a school network leader now, but more importantly, having served as a superintendent, in these times, the kids aren't at school. We understand districts have fixed costs. They still have bills to pay, but they are not actively teaching students. Is there any cost savings there? Is there something different districts can and should do with their resources? Or is it the fact that they have no flexible resources to do something different with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm very sympathetic to districts. I've run a large district and a medium-sized district, so I get it. However, I said back then and I say today, you always have the resources you need to do your top priority, especially if you're a big district. You always have the resources, you just have to prioritize. Now, yes, it costs more money to do simultaneous teaching. It does cost money for these masks, hand sanitizers. You should see a picture of a year's supply of paper towels. It's a couple pallets. It's pretty incredible. So yeah, it costs money to do all that. But we got the CARES Act, and that was helpful, and I hope the federal government and the state will continue to provide resources. At the same time, there are things you can do to save money. For example, online, if nothing else, you should be doing remote synchronous learning. So in one of our schools, we have two subjects, two teachers that we didn't have to hire in this school over here because the kids are taking the remote learning from a teacher in another school. So instead of hiring our 3rd grade and 4th grade art of thinking teacher right at this school, Copernicus 2, those 3rd and 4th graders at that time are taking the class that the academy in Aurora is doing. So we just saved 2 salaries right there because we were able to do this, because we're doing remote synchronous anyway. So if you think creatively like that, I think there are some cost savings. Substitutes is another one. We are no longer hiring a lot of subs. And that's unfortunate for substitutes, I know, but for us, we are saving money because when a teacher is absent, those kids get in line and take 4th grade math with the teacher in this school. Because they already have the Chromebooks, we're already doing synchronous learning anyway. So we found savings in that way.
So we have a lot of questions coming in, but we will, if we did not get a chance to answer your question, just know that we'll send it to the speakers and they will respond to this question. But I have this last question for you, Mike. What advice do you have for community members like us that we don't know which direction to go, we're not happy about the system? What advice do you have for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. But it's tough out there, and it's tough decisions that parents have to make. I get that. I would say check out your own local school first. Make sure that they're providing the education that you need. If they are not, then there are enough schools, and I don't want to give too much of an advertisement to my own network, but you can go online and look at our schools. Just go to Third Future Schools. You can look at our schools, but there's Colorado Early Colleges is right here. You can look at their schools. I mean, you can look at many other schools and try to find the education that's right for you. For some parents, they just want remote. That may be the right thing. For us, we're providing a choice, both remote and in person. Anybody can come because we're doing simultaneous teaching. So that's what I would say, and I know that's a hard decision. I don't take that lightly, but there are enough differences here that you should shop around.
Thank you so much, Mike. Please help me give a round of applause to Mike. Thank you so much. I appreciate your leadership, and what you've done in Aura has been amazing, Mike. Thank you. We are very lucky to have you in the community. Thank you so much. All right, so if you are joining us on Facebook or on Zoom, say thank you. We are moving forward with the program, and just know that you will be muted throughout the presentation, but you will be able to chat in your question. And also know that we're going to be doing a raffle at the end of the week on Saturday, and reach out to the famous Lori Collier, and we'll share her information. But also to let you know, on Thursday, we also have an amazing program, which is the Business Summit. So look out for the information. And on Saturday, we have the community healing that's taking place here at the Denver Botanic Garden. We have an amazing artist that flew all the way from Senegal, Africa, that's going to be performing. It's going to be truly a treat. All right, we are getting to the point where we are having the first panel. Now, and as you know, the topic of this education forum is defining the quality education of our children. And as we mentioned also, we wanted to have every single voice in the community to be heard. So if I mention your name, just please walk in to as panelists. We have our own Miriam Dia. Please, if you can come and have a seat here. And we have also Bethlehem. Beth, if you could please have a seat. And we also have Suman Bhatt that's going to be joining us virtually. If you can hear us, just know that you should be entering the Zoom platform as a co-host, and you will be able to mute and unmute yourself. And we also have Alicia Boyd here joining us. Please, if you can join us on stage. And we have a leader that very excited to have her, Sandy Brown, that's going to be joining us also. So I'll try to read this bio of these panelists that we have, and you can see their picture on the screen. And again, if you are following us on Facebook or Zoom, you can chat in your question. You don't have to wait until the end of the presentation to send in your question. So the sooner we can get it, the sooner we can pile it up and make sure we can get it. So I'm very excited about this panel. Welcome, ladies, powerful woman in the house. So, and I'll just read the bio. We have Miriam, actually that's my daughter. I better make sure I say her last name correct, Ja. High school freshman, ALG Youth Empowerment member. Miriam continued from the 8th grade in May 2020 from Murphy Creek. She will be starting high school in the fall of 2020 at Colorado Early College. I'm very excited that she's joining the great school. As a freshman, she's a member of the African Leadership Group, Youth Empowerment Group, and an intern working with the African Leadership Group. She has also recently begun a cosmetic business that costs me all my money, called Miriam Magnifique Collection. Miriam is currently working on launching her website and hope for it to be up by the beginning of September 2020. Miriam is an inspiring lawyer, aspiring to become a lawyer who hope to help rebuild the justice system so that it works for all. And we have Beth, the chair of the Women Empowerment Group. Beth is from Ethiopia. She has lived in Colorado since 2003. She received her bachelor's degree in accounting from Regis University in 2010. She is a mother of 2 young children who are currently enrolled in Aura Public School. She is a member of the African Leadership Group Women Empowerment Committee to fulfill her passion of empowering women. Welcome, Beth. And we have Suman Bhatt, head of school, Stanley British School. Suman is beginning his first year as head of school at Stanley British Primary School and a strong partner of the African Leadership Group. He was drawn to Stanley because of its student-centered approach to education, emphasis on social emotional learning, strong community, and commitment to diversity and inclusion. Welcome, we are very honored to have you. And we have Alicia Boyd, has 25 years of experience as an educator and administrator in the public school setting. She currently works as Dean of Student and French teacher. I told her we're going to do her part in French at Rangeville High School in Aura. Alicia worked to develop and build school-wide equity and restorative practice within discipline and classroom structure. Thank you so much for being with us. So we have Sandy Brown that I know. Sandy is the Chief Executive Administrator for Colorado Early College. Sandy is responsible for overseeing CEC network that has quite a few schools, include 3 middle schools, 6 high schools, and 2 satellite offices. Sandy brings over 20 years of experience in initiating academic institution and building education model. Thank you so much for being here. So give a round of applause to my panelists. And the way we're gonna go about this is I'm going to ask them a question because they all prepare talking points, and they're going to go through their talking points and introduce themselves, and I will share with you each of them what they're going to be covering. So Miriam will be talking about challenges and opportunity for school during the post-COVID-19. Actually, they all going to be talking about that, and they have talking points. So I'm going to ask them a question, and they're going to kick off by introducing themselves and answering the question. So now I'll start with you. How do students feel about remote learning? If you can introduce, just mention your name. I already read your bio, but if you can answer how do you think students feel about remote learning?
Yes, thank you. Before I start, I would like to thank ALG for this opportunity to be here representing the student voice. I really appreciate it. Like you said, my name is Miriam Dia. Now back to the question. I'll answer this in 2 parts. One, what I've heard from my peers about how they feel about remote learning, as well as my own experience. Through conversation with good friends, I have one good friend who didn't mind remote learning at all. It fit her personality very well. She appreciated it. She'd rather do her work on her own than be collaborating with others. So it fit her best, it fit her personality. She appreciated remote learning more than in person. While another friend of mine, she did not like remote learning. She prefers challenging others and working with others in school and being able to challenge each other's ideas and see where they come from and see how they got certain answers. So that's kind of what I've heard through conversation from my peers, and as well as my own experience. I would say I'm a very good student. I get my work done when it needs to be done. So school comes very easy to me in a sense, but for me, school is a way to express my social self, express myself to other people. And I think it helps me. For me, school is about challenging others and learning from others through different lenses. So not being able to do that was a little bit difficult for me. Doing school is easy. I'll get the work done whenever it needs to be done, but not being able to challenge others and debate and argue about certain topics was a bit challenging. So in summary, I hope that from the experiences I just shared, that it will be taken into consideration when we make decisions that directly impact students, because our voice matters at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So same question related to parents. How do you think parents feel about remote learning?
Thanks, Papa, for a warm welcoming. First of all, I would like to thank the mic.
Yeah, it's on. Just get closer to the mic.
Switch on. Okay. All right. Thanks, Papa. First of all, I would like to thank ALG for this great opportunity, and it's an honor for me to be here. As I mentioned, I'm a mother of 2 young children. And as a working parent and a mother who needs to be supervised at home, remote learning has many challenges for me. First of all, I have to choose between my children's education and my job. Giving up my job will create a financial burden for our family. Leaving my kids at home is unthinkable. I wanted to know what alternatives for those school leaders they have for a working parent like me. I can give you some example. I have my coworker, Richard, who's a single parent of 3 children at DPS. He can only hope his kids are following classes while he's at work. I have seen kids having difficulties following and staying focused on online classes. It's hard for our kids to compete with other kids which are in person learning like Cherry Creek School District. What our school leaders do for our kids? Do we have a daycare or a tutor available for a working parent? By itself, beside the financial burden, all this is hard to fulfill a parent and a teacher role at the same time for me as well. I wanted to ask, what alternative do we have for a working parent in our community or less? It's hard for me and it's been challenging since spring. So I want some answers done. I have so many questions and answers to provide. So answer me for if you have any alternative or a daycare or a tutor available. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, and that's a very good question. And hopefully school leaders are listening, and throughout the morning we will have answer to that. So Alicia, thank you. So I have a question for you. It's more related to technology. And could you talk to us a little bit, facing the pandemic, access to tech, use of knowledge of tech, parents knowing how to support their children using the technology system that's being presented to them?
Thank you very much for giving me the honor to be able to speak and to be a part of this group. This is a first time for us, and I think for us as educators, this is a chasm that we definitely need to close and build this communication. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Alicia Boyd, and I am a dean of students, an administrator. I've been working in administration role for a very, very long time. And so when we're talking about technology, as your question asked, it's a challenge because this is so unprecedented for even us as education. But as Mike had alluded to earlier, is really a sense of revolutionizing our educational system in the sense of bringing it to the 21st century in terms of technology, as well as really systemically looking and making changes to some of the inequities that we know are part of our school system. Again, remember that schooling in the United States looks the same, and it's mostly the same since the turn of the century, since the Industrial Revolution. And so the purpose of education has been the same in terms of for students and for parents, the same way since back in the 1900s. And so we need to make some changes, and that comes with technology. I believe that for us, because technology is changing and because we're using it so often, the barrier for parents to get to know what types of systems that their students are being given to look at and to learn and to use is extraordinary. And so as an educator, to answer your question, I really think that we as school systems, we need to do more work with educating our parents, bringing in parents and helping them to be involved in the technology advances of their students. Lots of things that are coming out that we've never seen before. I know even in my work, I don't know what a pair, there's some kind of group that they're doing with a technology that's called a pair, and I'm learning this myself. And so we need to give space for parents to come and learn the technology in order to make that very much available and accessible to their student. I really relate to my fellow panelist here and her angst and how, as parents that work, how are we able to do anything to support our students' learning and to support our household. And so that is something that's burdensome for us as educators, as administrators. However, I think we need the community and our leadership in our states and our local leaders to help us problem solve this. Oftentimes, I think for us as teachers is that the burden of teaching and learning has fallen on the school districts, and we weren't ever designed to take on so much responsibility ourselves. And so we really want to rely and to build those really strong partnerships with parents, with other community agencies, that we can have a system that really supports and promotes not only just learning for students, but learning for parents and learning for our community in terms of, like Mr. Mike said earlier, preparing ourselves not only for just post-COVID, but for the future of teaching and learning for our students, and closing those really enormous opportunity gaps that we have, based a lot on our inequitable system, but also based upon our inequities in terms of social economics. I mean, that's a huge barrier as well. So I really would like for parents to talk and become involved with their schools, talking to their principals, talking to their teachers, and being an active participant in creating those little forms of pods, particularly for parents, to learn some of the education pieces that are being presented to their kids, so they are actively able to support them when they can.
Thank you so much. And as you can see, we have a student, parent, representative from public school, from private school, and from charter school. We just have it to have, we wanted to make sure that we have all systems represented. And we have Sumat online, and I hope you can hear me. And the question I have for you, Sumat, is facing this challenge, and I just want to make sure you can hear me. So,
yes.
Can you hear me, Sumat?
Yep, I can hear you.
Thank you. All right, thank you. So, facing this pandemic, one thing that we really understood that it will take parents, students, and teachers to work together. From your point of view, can you talk to us a little bit about what does it look like, and how parents could go and students could go about having that relationship with teachers as well?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so sorry to not be in person at your beautiful space, and I'm so grateful to be part of this panel, and I love that we have student voice on it. Our students, we need to listen to our kids and their voices. It's so important today more than ever. And so, you know, as it was said, I'm the head of school at Stanley British Primary School, and we know we have some unique circumstances, but I think we're really taking pride in trying to help be a leader in finding new pathways for education in this pandemic, and that might be solutions for people in all different kinds of schools. And so I think one of the things, student-teacher relationships and connection is so important now more than ever. I have small kids, and I even find, even with my 4-year-old, that when they have a chance to connect with a preschool teacher for 10 minutes, they are more effective working later in the day. And so making sure we think about what that connection is. We know that there are challenges in terms of the number of kids for teachers to manage. We know that for students, managing lots of classes is challenging if you're a middle schooler or a high schooler. And so one of the things that I think that is really compelling right now is the opportunity to maybe explore opportunities to rethink how we go about school. For example, one of the things that we're looking at in our middle school is this idea of block scheduling. Colorado College is a university that has students take less classes, but for shorter periods of time. And so, for example, one of the things that we're looking at and exploring is having our middle school students take 2 classes for 4 weeks at a time. So they're only taking math and science for 4 weeks. It's nice for teachers. They have less kids to manage for a smaller time, and they get to spend more time, and they get to go deeper in the content, which is oftentimes really valuable for kids. Kids have less subjects to manage as well, and they can also build those connections with teachers because they get more of a focus with that. And I think there's some really interesting opportunities if we think about that. Parents know that their kids are being looked at by only a smaller number of teachers. And so there's that social emotional benefit as well, I think, for them. So, I'm really excited about these opportunities to think about what might be serving our kids well, what might make it easier on our parents to manage and support their kids at home, having less things at a time to do that, and how do we make sure we take care of our teachers to make sure they're managing their load in a reasonable way. So I think there's lots of opportunities for us to continue to explore these areas and figure out why not innovate in this kind of unique, challenging situation.
you so much, and welcome to the community, and we look forward to meeting you in person. I know we had some African Leadership Group kids that attended the summer program at British Stanley, so look forward to working with you. So thank you. And Sandy, I have a question for you. As we know, the mission of CEC is to provide good education to each student, regardless of background or skill level, the opportunity to succeed in school, in college, and the chosen career. So what are the Colorado Early College is doing specifically with the pandemic that we are facing, especially this coming year of school?
Okay, thank you for the question, Papa, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm both honored and blessed to be amongst so many brilliant people and who are working to best serve our students and our families. So Colorado Early Colleges mainly serves 6th through 12th grade students. And quite honestly, most of these students are in college courses. And so we have a very complicated outlook for how to best serve our students. So what happens when students are working remotely, both at the college and high school and middle school level? And so CEC, because we want to fulfill our mission that all of our students graduate with a free associate degree or industry certification or post-secondary certification, is that we had to make sure that our students were more supported than when they were in the classroom. So we've taken a look at a disaggregated model saying, we have a teacher, but we also need a mentor and we need a tutor. And it's all hands on deck to help these kids be successful. When we were forced into remote learning in the springtime, we were a little bit uncertain on what would happen, but we still had great success with our students. And from that, I'm glad we actually were forced into it because it helped us really think fast and then over the summer think through how we can better serve our students. So what we do know is that students who are trained on their platform before their studies begin are far more successful. So if we can get them engaged and on a platform that they're comfortable with and they turn in their first assignment successfully, we have about an 85% success rate of course completion. And so we've worked really hard, and I'm listening to families and what is going on there. Our biggest complaint from families was every teacher was doing something different, and the families could not keep up with that. So over the summer, we had a team that volunteered to come together to norm our platform and the experience for families and for students to help them be successful. So at CEC, we've done a slow rollout where we've trained for the first week or so, making sure that all kids had access and were successful, because that is very important to us that our kids are successful, right? And then we've used the mostly remote model, meaning that we are bringing in the cohorts that have achievement gaps. We're looking at them face to face and we're working with them, and all of our subpopulations and special ed and even GT who, those students need equal amount of support. Our English language learners are all coming in. Our lower performing students are coming in. But again, we're looking, it's kind of an interesting thing where our revenue is decreased to teach our students. We're having to look and be creative that maybe some of our teachers where it doesn't make sense to teach, like our advanced manufacturing or woodworking, those teachers are becoming our mentors for our students, and they all have a cohort. So it's more hands on deck for remote learning. It absolutely is. But we are trying to, we have so many locations in the state of Colorado, and if our building and enrollment made sense to open fully remote, we did just that. So we wanted to bring as many students back in, and because we have a lofty goal by 2022, graduating all of our students with free degrees, and we want to reach that despite the challenges and the hurdles that we see right now. And we've noticed that our population in Aurora really appreciated the asynchronous, so everything was recorded for them because maybe they had to work for their families or take care of their siblings, and so wanted the opportunity not to be on a set schedule for synchronous learning. And so we did listen to our families, and we've adjusted for that. But still, we open up all of our computer labs on campus to bridge that gap with high-speed internet. And it's one thing to give a computer, it's another thing to have access to the internet. And so we've opened up all of our labs and are working on that transportation to get to our schools to give the students that opportunity to have the technology that they need to be successful. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And we are so excited with the new building Colorado Early College have in Aura, and I highly encourage all of you to go and visit. But the other thing that I'm very excited about is because if you've been around the African Leadership Group, you always hear us say, if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. So thank you for having Alphonse and Dr. N as teachers over there, because it makes a difference when we have community part of the solution finding to the things that we want to address. So thank you. So Mariam, I have two questions I'm going to put together for you. Could you talk to us about student needs during online school? And also, what are the teachers' role during remote learning?
Yes, thank you for that question. So when it comes to students' needs during online learning, it tends to be a lot. We need to be engaged and we need to be interacted with. I feel as though that we weren't working, teachers and administration weren't really working on our schedule. They were working on their own. They weren't really there for us. The teachers, the platform we were provided with remote learning wise was difficult because the teachers weren't trained on the platform and neither were we. And we were expected to rely on our teachers to help us through this platform. And we ended up being told to look up answers online instead of figuring out the answers with our teachers and being able to learn, like that's what school's about. Instead, we're just looking up answers, and we don't want that to become our new norm of just looking up answers online when we're confused. We should be able to work through problems with our teachers along our side. But since they weren't prepared and we weren't prepared and they didn't have the proper training for the platform we were using, it ended up bringing a lot of confusion. So we need to have our teachers be trained fully and understand the platforms they're using in order to help us who are learning these platforms instead of having to go search up answers online. To me, that's considered cheating. So I want to be able to learn and understand everything I do completely so that the next time a problem like this comes up, I understand it and I don't feel confused. Another need that another need students are seeking through online learning is we need to remember that kids learn at different paces, and when you all give us all the same work, the same timeline, it's not going to help each student learn individually. You're giving a common platform that doesn't work for everybody. And I think it's important that we need to make sure, even if we are using a common platform, we need to make sure teachers are putting time aside to help every student with what they need in order to learn fully and completely. I think teachers are essential workers, like Mr. Miles said. If we fail an entire generation of students who are learning online, that affects our economy, our just in general, it's going to affect us completely. If we don't have students who are learning online the way they need to be, we won't have good doctors, lawyers, whatever it is that we need to keep this economy running. I think it's important that we remember that these teachers are essential workers and we need to provide for them in any way we can. When it comes to education of students, there are 3 people you must provide for fully and completely: the students, the parents, and the teachers. In order to have a quality education for our students, you must and you will make sure you provide for them in all the ways they need, even if the resources aren't available. We need to be able to find ways to provide for our teachers and our students, even if we don't have those resources. So I ask to make sure you provide for those who this impacts the most always, and that you promise to help us whenever we need it. Thank you.
Well, I don't know where it came from, but well said, Miriam. So, Beth, I have a question for you. What choice do you really think parents have facing this situation?
First of all, as a parent and a volunteer at ALG, when it comes to education, we are a pro-choice. We believe, or I believe, parents to choose the best school and education for their children. However, after many parents choose in-person learning, school board decided online until October here, I believe until October. I don't think our voice heard. I don't think we have given a choice. I talked to my sister. She has an 8th grader and a 6th grader at Aurora Public School. She chose in-person learning for so many reasons. She wants her kids to interact. She wants her kids to have less screen time. It's been a long spring and summer already, so she wants them to go out. But the choice wasn't hers. Let me give you a simple example. When you go to Walmart to pick up a gallon of milk, how many different types of milks we find?
So many.
Many of them, right? As a parent, I ask school leaders, how come we don't have a choice, something that's very important for our children, education? And what choice do we really have? Thanks. I think that's my point.
So I ask a question to tell me by asking the question to the school leaders, what choice do we really have? So keep that in mind when you come and you are addressing these questions. So Alicia, you talk about technology. Now, facing the situation, could you touch on the opportunities, if there's any?
Thank you. What a nice question. What opportunities? There are always tons of opportunities for students if they want to take them on. Some of the opportunities I know that, like I had mentioned before, that I'm having access to is providing for not only our students, but potentially for families too. An opportunity for students to engage in some of the new platforms that are coming out that are really innovative and creative, and students being able to use those platforms in presentations and in their learning. Other pieces for opportunities using technology come from different styles of teaching with technology. Great creativity can come out of using technology to do assessments. Now, before, many teachers or many districts, even our state, will use a kind of like a standardized test with multiple choice and answers, short answers for students. And oftentimes online and with technology, those things are not necessarily come with fidelity. I think students they're very savvy with technology. They can find answers and hate to have to look up an answer for the test. It doesn't really assess their knowledge. And so teachers right now in our school, we're looking at real creative ways of assessing student learning using technology. Also providing students with different types of ideas of using the technology that teachers are using as in presentation. So there are some technology. I know that the challenges sometimes right now is we have to start with baby steps, but some of those classes, and particularly in the high school where I'm teaching at, we're really pushing, and oftentimes kids are more technologically advanced than even their teachers, because they know this generation of student, they are very, very well versed in technology, and that lens for us it's not been. So they know how to get around things. They know how to use different, like we said, platforms. And so we want to use that knowledge that they already have to our advantage and for their learning. I think the shift now is, instead of using technology that they're used to for social entertainment, taking that technology and using it for advancing their learning. And we as teachers and educators are facilitators and showing them how to make that shift. And that's exciting.
Thank you so much for touching on those points. As bad the situation is, but there could be some opportunities. So thank you so much for talking about that. So Saman, I have a question for you. And as you know, facing this situation, most parents are torn apart between remote learning and in-person learning. Could you talk about some learning models that transition smoothly between in-person learning and home learning for teachers and students?
Yeah, sure. So I think, again, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, I think when we think about doing less subjects at a time, that makes it much easier to transition from home to from school learning to at home. I saw a question in the box in the chat just about how do kids manage 6 classes. That is so tricky to do that, and we saw that a lot last year. So if they have 2 classes they have to worry about, it is much easier to do that for teachers to transition. They don't have to worry about 300 kids to manage. They have a much smaller group that they're keeping in touch with and communicating and managing those numbers. The kids feel more connected to those 2. I think that's such a key piece to it. I also think when we're thinking about this, we should really consider, what do we teach and why now more than ever? What is the best use of our time when we do have live time at home? What should that time be spent on? Teachers, I think asynchronously, can really try to think about being curators of content, collecting information that's going to be engaging for our kids, providing it there, and then using the live space as a time for them to do more than just sort of share information that we want our kids to regurgitate. So I think that's a really key piece. I think also providing opportunities for choice and passion, I think both in person and at home, is really valuable, because we know that we are all more motivated when we're exploring things that we love. And at a time right now when kids are, when they're at home, giving them opportunities to be able to pursue things that are of interest to them, and having created spaces where we've curated content for them to explore, I think is a really powerful proposition for our students. And so I'd encourage us all to think about, how do we utilize our kids when they're naturally curious about things? Just provide them the space, provide them the resources, and let them go there. And then when we're with kids live, how do we really make sure that we're providing that connection? We're allowing for discussion and conversation so that they can stay engaged and then go off and continue to pursue those passions.
Thank you so much, Samar. And also want to let our online followers please send in your question, and we'll really get a chance to go through it. So just remember to chat in your question. So Fendi, a question for you. Could you talk a little bit about continuous virtual advising opportunity to support students to continue on their paths to earn a free associate degree and certification in this current environment we are in?
Sure, I can talk about just our advising and how do we keep students, in the state we have to work with students and families on their individualized career and academic plan, and what does that look like? And so we have had a lot of great opportunity to virtually make sure that continues to happen for our students, just to reach the goals for all students. I did want to, a part of our mission statement with our students is that all students will succeed in school, in college, and their chosen career. No exceptions, no excuses, meaning that all students need this. So we're finding that the more contact that we can have virtually, the more meetings with families and students, the more successful the students are going to be, and we'll be able to keep them on that path. So that's about all I have to share on that, but I just want to say out there, it's really important to stay connected with families and with students throughout this, so you do reach the goals with that. Can I add something to Samat's last comment? He brings up a really great, just thought that when we are doing remote learning, it is of my belief that we are not trying to reenact a classroom for students at home, that we're trying to teach and then give students the opportunity to do some follow-up with hands-on and very valuable learning the way a student might want to learn at home, instead of just like Mariam said, just looking up answers on the internet. That's not the I think, the best way to go about promoting remote learning. And we have to look at it differently, and it all takes time, right? So how can we teach, and then how can students follow through? And like Samat said, engage in learning at home. What does that look like instead of regurgitating information from home? So I think that that was a really valid point that he made. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sandy. And I'll be asking the last question to each of you and include your wrap-up summary. So, ma'am, I'll start with you. What could we have done that we can apply now?
Yes, thank you for that question. When we look back at the spring, a lot of questions come up of what we could have done. One thing that I saw was, why didn't we keep the same curriculums and the same forms of teaching we were already using and transition it to online? We had 3 weeks in between the spring break and the beginning of school again, where we could have planned that out and trained teachers to just, they already had curriculums planned out for the entire school year. They already had all their plans for the entire school year. Why didn't we just keep those plans and figure out a way to teach kids online while keeping them engaged? Because now, especially within APS, we were given a platform that was repeating kind of what we had already learned instead of taking us off from where we had left off. So we found ourselves just repeating and getting bored and not really learning anything new. We're just repeating the same things we have already learned. So why don't we keep the same curriculums we already had and transition it to online to keep students engaged and to keep us from being behind? Because now we are behind from the students that are in the grade above us. We are behind from students in years before us. We're just behind as an entire society now. We are behind from where we could have been and where we could be. So just that's something I see as an opportunity that now we can seize and use the curriculums we have, because we already have teacher plans. We already have all these curriculums in place. Let's figure out a way to put them online where they work for students in a way that just work for all students. Another thing is, we need to also make sure, I just want to emphasize this, that we need to make sure we are working with students one-on-one as teachers, because you're kind of leaving students in the dust here. You're just leaving them to learn on their own, and a lot of students need that one-on-one help. And when teachers aren't available, and now everything is via email, and it's hard to get in touch with your teacher, you're not able to just walk into a classroom and ask for help anytime during the day. So I think it's very important that we need to make sure there's time set aside for students to have one-on-one with teachers to get all their questions answered and things of that sort. I just want you all to know that when it comes to a relationship between students and school leaders, it's like one between kids and their parents. We look up to our parents to guide us and provide for us, to have a vision and a plan on how we are going to succeed in life, as well as making sure we are comfortable with it all. Instead of having a plan, we have only reacted. Instead of coming straight to the source, the students, when deciding on our education, you have simply just looked us over. So I want to make sure I emphasize this. Please come to us and ask us our opinion, because this impacts us first. Before it impacts any of you, it impacts us. And when it comes to this school year, it feels like there's no vision, no plan to make sure we get the best education. A lot of the information we are receiving is 3 days or a couple days before school starts. That's not how it should be. Since we're planning this out throughout the summer, we need to be informing parents and students throughout the summer to make sure they know what's going on, but not 3 days before school's actually starting. So I ask all the school leaders here, please do not fail us. Please make sure we are educated on what's happening for us. Please ask us of our opinion. Please make sure we are included in all of the decisions you make that regard us. I really do want students to have a voice when it comes to the decisions that are impacting them first. So thank you.
So no comment on that. So I'll leave it to the school leaders when they get their turn. So that's the question I have for you is two, aren't teachers essential workers, but also maybe you can comment or ask, what is out there for children that are fallen behind? And maybe you can share that with school leaders. So aren't teachers essential workers? And maybe what comment do you have to school leaders for children who have fallen behind? And you also can include at the end your closing remark.
Thanks, Papa. Yes, I believe teachers are essential workers since education is very important for our children. Teachers should be equipped with proper training and materials in order to succeed in their jobs. Let me say this. We all know how water is vital in our life, right? Yeah. So when it comes to our children quality of education, teachers play the same exact role. I wanted to say, since the quality of education is important and teachers playing that exact role, they are not only essential. We cannot build the future of this great nation without teachers. Besides that, yeah, based on my experience in spring, I don't think our children get a proper education. They are falling behind. I know and I understand it was unexpected time and it was unexpected and nobody was ready for it. But our children are falling behind and the school wasn't prioritized. It was given only 45 minutes to an hour a day. They weren't learning at all. So I wanted to ask school leaders, what are you doing to fill the gap for the children who fallen behind? And how would it be different this year? And I come with, like I said, more questions. So I want to know, school leaders, when they make a decision, please consult us. We are here to cooperate with you with our children's future. Don't overlook us. You know, at the end of the day, everything in life is about choice. Please allow us to have one. And for the parents in our community, I want you to attend all parent-teacher conference, school board meeting, everything you can. Involve as much as you can. This is our children's future. Please, thank you.
So much, Beth. And one thing I can tell you, school leaders always ask to hear from parents and students. Now you have it. And the question is what you're going to do about it. So, Ms. Alicia, so maybe an additional comment, what you hear as a teacher, what you hear from Miriam, what you hear from Beth, when it comes to teacher partnership and collaboration, and also include your closing remark.
Miriam and Beth, I mean, I hear and you very loud and clear in terms of what we as leaders and teachers can do to help support. I think that, again, we keep reiterating the fact that this is unprecedented. This is something that we've never experienced as students, parents, and teachers and administrators. And so for you, Miriam, it took a long time to get all of everything together for that first 3 into fourth quarter that you experienced in Aurora Public Schools. And we recognize that we've made some mistakes. And really trying to make sure that we are listening and really trying to make sure that we are engaging and reaching out to our parents and our students is just an essential piece. Everything is different depending on the different schools. However, I think mainstreaming some of the pieces that are essential is something that we all need to do a better job of. In terms of what can we do, I think the biggest piece is that, again, we are not two sides of a different coin. We are working, and we should continue to work in partnership with our parents and our students. It should be a triangle where one end cannot function without the other. And so often we've left one end to function all by itself and to kind of figure it out. And so if we can get back to the point where we as a community, where our parents are fighting for the education of their children, kids are fighting for their own education, and teachers are fighting and administrators are fighting for that same common good, we most definitely can make some progress. But this is not easy, it's not quick, and it does take planning and it does take time. And so if we're all working in for that same better good, then therefore we can make a result. We absolutely, as a triangle, we need to revolutionize how we educate students in the United States of America. And that's a big deal. In our little microcosms of classes and communities, we can start that revolution by thinking outside of the box and by demanding a better way. And at least in my neck of the woods, those voices are being heard, and we are definitely working and planning together on how to make that happen. I just want to reiterate my appreciation dearly of being a part of this forum and being able to hear the different voices. And I'm taking lots of notes, and I'm learning a lot to take back. And so in conclusion, I just think this is a fabulous way to begin a really hard work. And if as an educator, if I know that I have parents and students behind us that we're working going in the same direction, it makes the burden and the difficulty of the work a little lighter. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, Sumant, I have a question for you, and you can include your closing remark here. We talk about children education, but could you touch a little bit the importance of parent education in setting up home learning success?
Yeah, I think it's really important, certainly on a lot of different fronts. I think depending on the age of the learner, obviously our youngest kids need more support from our parents in helping. And that is really challenging when you have working parents at home and you have lots of different needs of different family members and responsibilities. And so I think making sure that we're setting up our families for success by thinking about how do we convey our parent education? Are we just sending thousands and thousands of emails? Are there ways that we can get information in different ways so they know what's going on? How do we do it in manageable amounts and find out what's most essential to support their kids? Because I know parents have so many things that they have to take care of in their own life. And so how do we be thoughtful and design our parent education from the perspective of our parents? And to the point that's been made, like really listening to our parents about what they need and what's most important, and listening to our kids as well. I think empowering our kids with the skills that are really needed right now. And again, while I do appreciate that, sometimes we view our kids being behind as based on an amount of content that is learned. And I think in today's world, it is not just about the content, it is about the skills. And so really, as we are, as educators designing this, we need to make sure that we're educating our parents and our kids from a skills standpoint. What are the understandings that are most important? We want to make sure we're developing critical thinkers. We want to make sure we're producing content creators. And so how do we make sure that we're accomplishing that? And so I'm less concerned about making sure our kid can, read page 480 on the science book and get to that spot. I'm more curious to make sure they understand the scientific method and the skills behind that. So right now, as we think about as educators and school leaders, I really think that our call to action is really about making sure we don't just sort of try to replicate when we think about home learning or remote learning. We try to replicate exactly what the in-person school model is, as Sandy's kind of talked before. We can't do that because it's just not going to be an effective solution. However, if we really think about listening to our kids and our parents and design a new sort of framework and model that meets our kids' needs, that thinks about connection, that thinks about how they can be motivated to do work outside of those live times and really pursue their passions, that's going to be a much more effective model for actually helping our kids learn more information. But if we just kind of try to repeat what we do in schools normally and then just try to push content and then hope kids learn it, that's not going to be an effective way to kind of close the gap. And so I think really trying to inspire, trying to utilize live time, when we do that kind of synchronous time together, using it appropriately, that's going to be the real sweet spot for education, I think, moving forward. And thank you all for having me as well. I feel really privileged to be part of this community and try to create solutions for our families and students.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. So, Sandy, I have a question for you, and you can include your closing remark. As a leader of a network of schools that are in different districts, what is so unique about Aurora? What has been your finding the Colorado Early College in Aurora, and what message do you have for the community as far as helping sure that we contribute to the success of Colorado Early College in Aurora?
Great. Well, I love our Aurora school and so much, and when we went for our charter in Aurora, we were really challenged that we would never be able to do better things for kids than what the current school district was doing. And so that was a bit of a challenge. And so we took the challenge, and I'm really glad that we did. And at the end of year 3, which is not, you know, it's not leading into a student being in our program for 4 years, we had 65% of our students graduating with free degrees, and or again, you know, with industry or post-secondary certifications. So what do I see different there? First of all, I believe every student or every child who is born is meant to learn, and there's no differences. And so we need to, like all students, pour into them and give them the added support that they do need. And, you know, it's kind of an interesting, even from Fort Collins to Colorado Springs to Aurora, we bring in, you know, just usually about 30% of our students that are way below grade level. And so we have a system where if you need to learn how to multiply, we teach you that. But we get you there, and it's accelerated and it's quick, and it's an individualized approach. And I think because CEC has an individualized approach, and Miriam, every person is different, right? You have different strengths and different areas of opportunities, and we want to look at that for every student. And we do that in Aurora no differently than anywhere else. But, you know, we say you can do this, right? And so with the right supports and the right encouragement. And we also believe, I strongly believe, that when you give young people opportunities, they rise to that occasion. So we don't want to see you, Miriam, having to sit in a class that you already know all the information in. We are a skill-based school, and you can soar as quickly as you would like to. And in some instances, Miriam, we've had students graduate with their 4-year degree, right? A bachelor's degree out of high school. You know, it just depends on what you want. So we have seen great success. We just moved into a brand new building to better support engineering and medical careers, and we're opening this Wednesday, and we're really excited about that because we want to bring as many opportunities that make sense. So CEC doesn't look at students as just earning a high school diploma. We say, what do you want to do with your future, right? Because we're like the last stop for mandatory education, so we want to make sure we get it right and make sure that these students are on the path that they so desire to be on. So far, after 3 years, great success. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Now, we got a lot of questions, and I know we won't have time to, yes, Laurie is telling me time, but I have to read a couple of these questions, and just feel free to jump in, anybody that think like they can answer. The first question here is, how do students manage their mental health during online learning? It's a tough one.
I think I can take that one. When it comes to mental health, it's very difficult, I would say. I've seen a lot of students really stress about online school, especially the ones that take their education very seriously. I'm one of those people who ended up stressing a lot about online school. And one thing our school already had in place was a group of students who take their education very seriously, that teachers see as people who stress a little bit about it. They created a group of those students who could meet every week to just talk about school, talk about expectations from our parents, from our teachers, from our peers. And we got together every week and we were able to talk about that. That was one way we could relieve some of that stress to keep our mental health somewhat stable throughout online school. I mean, not actually being able to school is stress enough, and having to do online and making sure you're still on track can be a little bit difficult as well. So I would say just having groups of students who have same values, have same core values, who see education as a very important thing, having them meet and having them just let go and talk about it all, that really helped me and some of my peers kind of not stress too much about school. We knew we weren't getting a grade, but to us, it was still a grade no matter what. We wanted to make sure we got it right and perfect every time. So I would say just having small groups of students meet and come together and just let it out and just talk about school and everything else that's going on in their lives. I think that's really important.
Thank you. And we'll ask this last question, and I promise that if we did not answer your question, we will email it to the panelists and they will get, but I got to ask this question. So somebody sent in, say, as a student, I know firsthand how confusing virtual learning was in the spring. Do you have any tips for students to stay organized and prepared during virtual learning? Anybody that want to take that one on?
Sure, I'll take a first stab at it, and obviously people should jump in. But I think one of the things that's really important that I found in working with our kids during remote learning has been for them to really intentionally create a schedule every day that has habits and routines about what time you wake up, getting dressed up for school, like it's a job almost, just getting dressed up so that it feels on your schedule, putting in things like from 8 to 8:30, I'm going to be, eating breakfast, 8:30 to 9:15, doing my math work, 9:15 to 9:45, like go for a walk or run or something, and just build in both health and wellness, build in time for doing your work, build in time for other responsibilities you might have at home. And that way you kind of can keep yourself honest and learn and develop habits at home, because there are so many distractions at home, I know. So the more you can kind of build a system in that gets you into habits and really write it down and make it intentional, I think the easier or the more likely you are to be set up for success.
Thank you. And Delisha, you wanted to add something? That conclude our first panelist. Please help me give them a round of applause. There was a lot of information shared, so we want to thank you. We are at the time where we're going to take a break, but before we do so, really want to give a shout out to all our sponsors that's making Afrik impact this year: Bank of the West, Walton Family Foundation, Othe Related Foundation, Colorado Succeed, Midwest Bank, First Bank, Rose Community Foundation, Ready Colorado, I Stand With Immigrant, Stanley British School, Pacific Western Bank, Wildflower School Colorado, Terrapin, Akundele LLP, Colorado Children Campaign, Urban Spectrum, Academy Advanced Learning, TBK Bank, Denver Botanic Garden, Havana Sign, Gaylord Rockies, Evans Kwesi Mensa, and our own MNC Collection with Marion. So thank you all. We're going to take a quick minute break, so we will get back to it, and we'll have, if you are our panelists and you are joining us online, we will be right with you. And I think this is a time for us to introduce our keynote speaker. I'll get to it here, and all right, welcome back to the 5th annual Afrik Impact. It's amazing how a year can go by fast and everything that can happen within a year. So that's quite interesting. So we have an amazing treat this morning, one of our own, and that's been the dream of the African Leadership Group. How do we get to the point where we have successful stories from our community that we get to highlight and celebrate? So it's an honor to introduce you to Lydia Natolo, Vice President of the Ugandan North American Association. Lydia is the Vice President of the Ugandan North Association, currently working as a hospital administration assistant. Just got a promotion, congratulations, at the University of California Medical Center, with a major in biological science and a minor in political science. The former president of UCI student body 2017-2018, a senator at the UCI, the former president of honor student at Saddleback College, a member of a PHI Theta Kappa Honor Society, an international scholar laureate member, and a scholarship recipient. Lydia is the president of Love a Community, a nonprofit organization that focuses on building rural village by providing basic needs like water and healthcare. The youngest, somebody beat me actually, the youngest of 28 children, Lydia was born in Lusasi, a village in Uganda. Lydia witnessed firsthand the struggle of living without basic necessities, such as food, running water, and electricity. Since her arrival to the United States in 1999, Lydia has volunteered with various organizations such as Invisible Children and Lobby on Capitol Hill to raise awareness for her cause to today. Please help me welcome Lydia. We are so honored to have you among us. And she just got in late last night, but we are so thrilled to have you. Thank you and welcome.
What an honor. Thank you, Papa. I appreciate you, sir. What an honor. It's really a humbling moment for me. I always say I'm a proud African child. I know we live in a new world order where you can't see my smile because I love to smile. And with such, I think my story has been told. I currently live in Irvine, California. And I say I stand here, not just Lydia, and being the president of my own community. Actually, our council member who lives here in Colorado, Ponte Afa, was here. I think he just stepped out. But I bring my Ugandan community here. My sister Medina is right here. I bring our African heritage today. And to have an honor to speak on an educational forum, I always say that ever since I was a little kid, I was born in the era where HIV/AIDS was eradicating almost most of my family members and neighbors. And I always ask my father, why are our brothers dying, our sisters dying, our community members dying? And the only thing he told me, we don't have medicine to this disease. And such as a little girl, I said, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor. So it's an honor that I graduated 2 years ago from one of the best academic institutions. And to our academic leaders, thank you for the work you're doing. I came to this country, not even a dollar to my name, but a big dream to have an education. So to stand here is so humbling. So thank you, sir. And I'm sorry I arrived at 5 o'clock in the morning, Colorado time, so I am literally sleepy, but I'll make sure that I go through this conversation and share my journey. Just like Papa said, I'm so grateful to Africa Impact. Actually, I was reading through your core values, transformation, integrity, diversity, excellence, equality. Thank you for that vision, sir. The purpose of this event is to celebrate our collective accomplishments, recognize our community champions, and cast a vision for the next year of policy and advocacy work. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much. Why do I share my story? I always say our story is power. I actually have a narrative that your story is the only ticket that will take you through this world. Your story is the only ticket that will take you through this world. Why? Because it's unique to you. You've lived it. You've lived it. I want to bring a narrative of I call him the father of Africa, the late Papa Madiba Nelson Mandela. He said that education is the most effective weapon that will ever change the world. As a scientist, I love to digest words. Why did he say education is the most effective weapon? Growing up in Africa, I grew up in the war, and many of you who grew up in Africa, you know that narrative. Why the weapon? Because we've grown through that narrative of the battles, of the war, of the guns that kill our people. But why does the late Nelson Mandela say education is the only weapon? Because again, it's the only thing that can take us through this world, beyond the wars, beyond the poverty, beyond the struggles. To be able to graduate from the University of California, Irvine, and actually even get an opportunity to get a job, if I did not go through the struggle of my academic journey, I wouldn't be where I am. So thank you to our educators. Thank you for those who are creating schools where you can empower, especially us, the immigrants in this country. We all know that immigrants and minorities are at the bottom ladder of the social narrative in this country. We come with a burden from where we come from. We come with that baggage on our shoulders. I always say that I've never had a vacation. I used to work every day and go to school because I knew that that is the weapon I have to use in order for me to climb the social ladder in America. Coming to this country as a teenager, with no father, with no mother. I had family. But again, as immigrants, everyone has their own journey, their battle. I knew that I had to do whatever I can as a young woman to make sure I keep myself in school, to make sure that actually not only take care of my life, but open the door and be able to help those I've left behind. When Papa shared that I have a nonprofit organization, while I was navigating my journey here in America, I heard about the story of children in our country who are being abducted by a rebel leader. What did I do? For many of you who know Invisible Children, what I did is to reach out to these young Americans who had actually become a voice for us, for our people. I started to journey with them. I've gone to United Nations. I've gone to Capitol Hill. We've been lobbying, and I realized that there's a power in telling a story. The story I started to tell, actually, for me even to get my own voice, was a story of young girls and boys given guns, first to kill their own parents, then go into the neighborhood. Children, instead of being given an education, were being abducted. Young girls raped at such an early age. Teenagers becoming mothers. And I'm proud to say that I'm grateful that I used my voice. Because of that, the war ceased in the northern part of Uganda. But that is a physical war. Uganda is a population of 43 million people, but the size of Oregon State. Uganda is a population of 43 million people, but the size of Oregon State. 70% of the 43 are youth. Almost 90% live under poverty level, which is not American poverty. $3 a day. 51% are women, but only 1% of the population has an education. It makes me pain. It makes me feel so much pain to know such a populace of our women are not educated. And we all know mothers are the backbone of our countries. My mother never had an education. Her mother never had an education. So I am so humbled and proud to be in this country, America, that has given them an opportunity to have an education. But we need to do more. We all know that we have communities, our own people, who cannot even break barriers here in America. Our own education system favors a few. We need to have these conversations. We need to speak truth. And I want to thank each and everyone who is doing whatever they can to make sure that we break those barriers. We create bridges for everyone. To say that every soul matters in this country. But also I want to empower you. Let us think about our people who are on the African continent. At this time and age where we're going through COVID, Uganda itself, many are not working. Mothers have to walk to go to the hospital to give birth. There's no water in hospitals. There's no medication. There are no doctors. And I talk about health because that is my passion. There are our children sitting under trees in the 21st century to study. There are no classrooms for some communities. I want to invite you to be the champions to change other communities too. As a vice president of an organization, Uganda, North America, Uganda, our UNA organization here in the diaspora, I want to invite you to be part of our conversation too. Our own Africans, even here in the diaspora, are struggling in so many ways. How can we become the bridge to empower each other, to hold the other's hand and say, I will not leave you behind. So as we continue to have this conversation throughout this week, let us rethink how we can be different, how we can do different. Again, my name is Lydia Natolo. I want to thank you so much. We are going to have our UNA virtual convention. I want to invite you the first week of September. I'll be sending the information to Papa. Let us have this civic discourse. But thank you so much for having me. I am so sorry that I feel exhausted, but I'm so excited to be here. So thank you so much, Papa. May God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Lydia. It's truly an honor to hear your story and how powerful it is. But most importantly, thank you for sharing. Because as African immigrants, we all have a story. Sometimes we shy away from sharing it because for whatever reason, we might be ashamed of it. But when we hear other people that get it to a certain point and share their story, we can learn from it. It's an honor also to have you here, to have you come from California and be part of the family and be part of the community. It means everything. So, Medina, thank you so much for thinking outside the box, making this connection. And thank you for the fact that you're going to be here with us throughout the week to celebrate and to work together. So thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So again, if you are following us online, get ready. We have the second panelist here. And we have a lot of expertise in a panel. The hardest part is to introduce them because the bio is just books. So, so I will just try to do my best and tell you their name, and you'll get to know them throughout the presentation. But we also have some of the panelists that are joining us online, and I will go over it here. So just trying to get to the right page here. So, as you hear, we have the first panel that talk about challenges and opportunity. Now we have the second panel here. Now, do we have Bill Kurtz, DSST, public school online? Bill, if you can hear me online, if you can say something that we know you are online. All right, and we were expecting to have Jennifer Bacon, Denver Public School Board of Education. I know she was planning to be in person, but hopefully she will join us here. And we have Susanna Cordova, Superintendent of Denver Public School. And Susanna, you are online. If you can hear us and maybe unmute yourself. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I certainly can. Thank you. I've been listening all morning.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. And we also have Senator Paul Lundin here.
Papa, it's an honor to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And we have one of our own, Tatenda Blessing, here. And you will learn more about Tatenda.
Thank you so much, Papa.
And we also have Rachel. She is with Wildflower here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And we should have Dr. Terry Lewis online. If you can hear us, Dr. Terry. Dr. Terry Lewis, if you can hear us, if you can maybe unmute yourself. All right. If you have any technical challenges, just send in a chat, and we'll start it here. So for those of us that's following us online and through Facebook, just know that you will be muted throughout the presentation. But please, we encourage you to chat in your question And as the second panel, they're going to be talking about change management and solution to help ensure educational success during COVID-19 era. They all know about the topic, and they all hear from the first panel also that we have. So we have talking point. So for each of them, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask a question. So you're going to kick it off by just sharing a little bit about yourself and dive deep into the question. So I'll start with the people that we have here in the House. So Senator London, thank you for being here. The first question that I have for you as a senator working at the state capitol, how has it been for you at the legislative level when it comes to education and the situation that we've been facing?
Great question, Papa. And it is an honor to be here with you in the good ministrations of Lori Collier. Boy, if you want somebody to put on an event in an effective way, reach out and get a hold of Lori. She knows how to make it happen. And I appreciate so much what ALG is doing, specifically with regard to education. Before I dive into the education piece, I'd like to talk a little bit about some commonality we have. And I think this is taped down a little bit short there. Your theme, value in our common voice. I also see something else going on here that I think is critically important, and it comes from the wisdom literature. The wisdom literature says iron sharpens iron. In other words, when you bring one challenging proposition against another, you can come to a place where you find perhaps a stronger answer. The wisdom literature also says a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And so I see there's not only value in our common voice, but there is incredible wisdom in our common voice. And I appreciate so much what you're doing, specifically with regard to education. You just heard an incredible keynote. Ms. Natolo told us the story of how critically important education is. I would argue that after family, after faith, nothing is as important in a child's life as education, because it will have the capacity to transform what that child's life looks like over the extended period of their life, their existence. And so getting it right is so very, very important. And to the policy question that you raised, Papa, it has been my considered conclusion, and let me give you just a teeny bit of background if you didn't see it in the bio. I'm in my 2nd year in the state Senate. I served 4 years in the House prior to that, on the Education Committee in both bodies. Prior to that, I served 4 years on the State Board of Education, 2 years as a member, 2 years as chairman. Prior to that, I was an entrepreneur, 10 companies over almost 30 years. And it is my considered conclusion from that body of policy experience and life experience that the intrinsic desire of parents to find the best learning opportunities for their children transcends politics. It rises above politics. And that's where the question you've just raised is. As a senator, as a legislator, the cliche is, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So I'm in the policy environment. We look at and we see laws and policies. But the reality is, this intrinsic desire of people to find the best learning opportunities for their children gets constrained. It goes from a very personal, very individual pursuit. And this goes to the heart of Beth's question. Beth raised this question and said, what choice do we really have? And I think that's a key question. Unfortunately, in the policy environment, so much of the education system over the years has become bound up and controlled by what I would describe as the politics of the status quo. Now, the whole panel's on change management, change implementation. What is the change capacity? We are in a circumstance now where the challenges of the system that we have are being revealed with incredible clarity. And you know what? When I pull my mask all the way up, it doesn't slide down. So I'm going to pull my mask all the way up so it stops sliding out. We are in this circumstance where the challenges of our existing system are being revealed so clearly. And you heard from some education leaders today who are doing great things, who are willing to challenge themselves and challenge the work they're doing to make it more meaningful in this environment in which we find ourselves. So I'm going to curtail my comments right there, simply to say, and I would be eager to come back to this when I get another opportunity for interaction. The key element, in my opinion, to managing change, to driving choice, to making that individual impetus, that individual drive of a parent to find the best opportunities for their child, regardless of affluence, every child should have this opportunity, is in changing the way we finance public education, how the funding flows. Currently, I will postulate with great clarity, conviction, and factual proof, the system is designed and funded to support the existing system. What I would argue is we need to reconsider the way the funding flow happens in order to support individuals and students and parent choices, to go back to Beth's question. So I'll stop there. I've got a 7-hour education finance policy statement I can make on this, so I'll just curtail my comments right there.
Thank you so much, Senator. It's truly an honor and valuable information. I want to go back to Bill Kerr, CEO of DSST. Bill should be online. If you could hear us, Bill?
I can. Good to see you, Papa Dia.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to kick it off with a question, and you can just introduce yourself a little bit and answer the question. There's one thing you talk about, your talking points, is double down on your score. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me here today, and thanks for holding this, and have so much gratitude and respect for the work you do, Papa Dia, and in our communities, and so important. And so thank you for your partnership, and it's never been more important than today. So we're really grateful for that. And it's great to be here. And I think, we're just at a moment in time where I think, from our perspective as an organization, the tremendous systemic inequities of our country and of our communities, and certainly what many of our families and students experience are getting greater, not smaller. And I think the most vulnerable are becoming more vulnerable, and certainly our children are at great risk right now of certainly not being supported and provided the education they need, unless we as the leaders in the community, we as the the educators double down on serving them with excellence. And so, we're very committed at DSST to ensure that in this time when it's so easy just to be surviving COVID, to be surviving kind of the challenges of running schools, which are great today, and I don't want to underestimate that. It is very difficult, and I know my fellow panelist Susanna has a task 2 or 3 or 4x as complex that I have, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult. We want to acknowledge that, but I think we owe it to our students and families to deliver excellence and to recognize that gaps that existed before COVID are probably greater today. And we have to acknowledge that and be kind of unabashedly recognizing that that's probably the case. And if that is true, we can't run away from that. We have to actually run towards that. And we have to embrace an equity agenda that I think is even deeper than we've ever committed to, and an agenda that truly embraces the systemic racism and inequities of our society. And so that's something that we have embraced at DSST, and we're really focused, as we start this school year, on ensuring a couple things. Number one, that every child in our network, all 7,000 in Denver and Aurora, have access, high-speed access to do online learning. And if we don't provide that for our children, they can't learn. And that's inexcusable, and it's something we adults must figure out. And so that is point number one for us, is that every single child is set up on day one of school for us to have the access to the education we provide, and that if they don't, we will do whatever it takes to make sure they have that. And then secondly, for us, Papa Dia, it's really about making sure that our expectations truly honor the commitments we've made to our families. And we have set out the ambitious goal as a network to make sure that every child learns as much this year as they would in a normal year. And that is ambitious, that is challenging, that is, I think some people think we're crazy. And we just believe that if we don't try for that, we are letting our kids down, because what that's essentially saying is that we're going to perpetuate inequity, not actually solve it. And so that is our second commitment. And our third commitment is to be very deeply mindful of data and recognizing how different communities and groups of students in our population, certainly our most vulnerable, are doing. And so that we are doubling down on closing those gaps within our data, not widening them. And so that's a few concrete things that we're doing. And we just have such deep belief that we have to be better than we've ever been as an organization today for our students and families. And I truly hope that that we will step up, and I think our team of 800 is going to do that.
Thank you so much, Bill. And just want to, as you can see, the theme of Afrik Impact this year is the value in our common voice. And as you can see on the panel, we have the superintendent, school board of director, we have senator, we have community leaders. So we have the head of Colorado Charter Institute. So that's truly the reflection of the topic. So please listen carefully and chat in your question. But next, I would like to bring Tatenda Blessing from our community, actually, and looking to open a Montessori school in our community that we are so excited. Somebody from our own community have such an ambition to do so. So could you tell us a little bit about Montessori approach and how it supports the whole child and their social emotional learning, please?
Thank you, Papa, and thank you for having me. Such a privilege, and I'm so humbled to be here. So my name is Tatenda Blessing Muchiriri. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. I'm a Montessori educator, and I also sit at the Montessori, Colorado Montessori Association Board and Moon and Stars Foundation. And I'm a learner. I say that because I understand that being a Montessori educator, it simply means that you never stop learning. And one thing that I want to highlight before I share a little bit about Montessori is what Lydia has shared, and that what I bring today to share as well, that we carry with us our stories. And that is what we do in Montessori. We value those stories that children bring in the environment. So Montessori education is nothing but the story of my people. African culture and indigenous cultures have known this about child development, about learning, about coming together in a community and the power that is in a community for our kids to learn. So Montessori education really focuses on the whole child. We see the child as it is. We are saying that there is that intrinsic desire for them to learn. So as adults, as teachers in a Montessori school, we are tasked with that one task, to sustain and support that love of learning. So when you are in a Montessori school, and when we open a Montessori school in Aurora, we are tasked with supporting that intrinsic motivation to learn. We are going to be valuing their stories, their culture. For many years, for many, many years, our Black and brown and children from low income have been marginalized. They haven't been given access or even choice for parents to choose Montessori as a choice for their children to learn. So we're saying that we are bringing an education that is going to look at the child as they are and support that learning, support that independence, which is going to be very crucial as we are learning with COVID, that if we're going to open schools, if we're going to have our children go back to schools, we are going to be focusing on their social, their emotional development. How are we going to do that? And we're saying in Montessori school, we are already strategically positioned to help children in that way, because this is what we focus on first. We are not so much into the academics, we are so much into who they are, What do they want to learn? Because we understand that there isn't any one-size-fits-all for education. We are going to look at them individually. We'll look at them for who they are and what they want to learn, where they are developmentally. So Montessori education really has that power, has that opportunity for us and for our children to come into an environment where they're going to be seen, where they're going to be validated, where their culture, their experiences, their story is going to be what they're going to see as they learn. Because learning is just learning has to happen in a way that your life is not separate from what you're learning. And what we're saying is that we need to create an environment where their culture, where their stories are part of the environment where they're learning. And that is, to me, Montessori, a way of life, a way, an only way our children can learn looking forward during the pandemic and post-COVID.
Thank you so much, Tatemba. Thank you. Well said. And I would like to bring Dr. Terry Lewis with Colorado Charter School Institute. And Dr. Terry, it's truly a pleasure to have you here, but I would like for you to start by telling us a little bit, what is Colorado Charter Institute? What is the role so the community can have a grasp of it? And also, how do you work with the district? Because we hear the Charter Institute and the district. What is that relationship is like when it comes to evaluating charter school in our community? And if you can introduce yourself while you do that as well.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be part of this incredible and powerful experience. So thank you so much for doing this, Papa Dia, and to everyone else who's participating. So the Colorado Charter School Institute is unique. There are 178 school districts in the state, and then there's the Charter School Institute. We oversee 42 schools throughout Colorado, serving about 18,000 students, and we're in about 23 different cities and towns. So we're in many different school districts, geographic school districts. And so the relationship between our schools, CSI, and the district is very important, and it's something that we've worked on in the last 4 years to make sure that that is a positive and productive relationship. There are all kinds of reasons why a school might be authorized by CSI versus the local district, but whatever those reasons, at the end of the day, we want to have transparency, we want to have a positive relationship with the geographic district, and we want to work together. In a time like COVID, it's even more critical that that communication is there between all those three entities. And in a time of COVID, it is a time for us to rethink, what is an authorizer? An authorizer is not a traditional district. We do provide support and we do ensure compliance. But what does support look like? And I can tell you that we have been moving in this direction of more support, and right now that's what we want to do. We want to support our schools to do what they need to do to meet the needs of their communities. Listening to their school leaders is so powerful because I love how they're addressing this so quickly. They're nimble, they're agile, and they're like, how do I meet the needs of students? I listened to what Bill Kurtz had to say and what Sandy Brown had to say and other school leaders about what they're doing with their students. What we have to do as an authorizer, since we're one step backwards, is how do we support the school to meet the needs of the community? Our schools are in all kinds of communities. We have a school that's 45 students in Fruita, which is west of Grand Junction. We have schools in Durango and Steamboat. We have a 2,000 student school in Federal Heights. So very different communities serving different students with different needs. And so how do we help provide that? And then without talking too much, I'll tell you real quickly some things we do. We want to ensure accountability. That can't go away. It's going to look differently. How do you hold schools accountable academically, financially, and operationally? Still need to do that. We want to make sure they have the autonomy to do what they need to do for their students and meet their students' needs. We want to make sure that our schools have are providing all kinds of access to different kinds of educational programs. So how do we provide as many opportunities? And that's going to look different. You'll see our schools coming up with different educational programs to meet the different needs of students. And so within one school, you may have different educational programs. And so how do we do that? How do we ensure that there's access to a strong educational experience? And we have to advocate for our schools, just like our schools are advocating for their students. And then they have to be quick. You know, in education, we like to try to pilot a program or grow small. Charter schools are known to try to start small and then grow. We don't have that opportunity right now. We have to jump in. All of us are in this together. How Colorado Early College is approaching this, and Denver School of Science and Technology is approaching it, and Strive Prep is approaching it. It's different, but we all have to be quick. We have to then adjust the needs, and listening to the students is so fascinating because they are the ones that are going to help guide us. And listen to school leaders that say this is about skills as opposed to content. That's how his school's approaching it. And it's refreshing to say we have to look at this new environment. What's it going to teach us about education and how to meet the needs quickly for our students? So I look at this as an opportunity. It's easy to be overwhelmed by the seriousness and the gravity of the situation, and I hear it from our school leaders. But there's also an element of we can learn so much from this, and the keynote speaker Lydia spoke so well about overcoming some of the massive challenges that students have experienced in our communities and experiences in Africa, and we can learn how to succeed in spite of it and become stronger. So I think this is what this opportunity is about. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Terry. I appreciate it. And I would like to bring Superintendent Cordova, but I want to start by really thanking you for your availability and your partnership with the African Leadership Group. We really appreciate everything that you are doing. So for somebody that's been dealing with this pandemic firsthand, could you share with us how it has been, and as a community, what should we expect this coming year, please?
Sure. So thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you all. I think this is the kind of effort that we need more of to make sure that we are tightly connected to our community, to share information and to give feedback, frankly. What I would say is, as we have been grappling with the many challenging decisions that started really last March, one of the things that has been most challenging is just the amount of decisions we need to make and the lack of information at times that is available to us to help inform those choices. We've been very proactive in reaching out to work with local health experts from Denver Health and the Denver Department of Public Health and the Environment. And the truth is they are in many ways just maybe one step ahead of us in learning and understanding the impact of COVID on young children, on our community, and on how to think about safely reopening our schools. We definitely believe that in-person learning, when we can be safe and do so safely, is in the best interest of our students. There are a lot of things we've learned from remote learning that we want to keep and that we want to maintain. And I definitely heard some of the young people earlier today talk about virtual learning worked really well for some kids. We want to make sure that we capture what has worked really well, the availability of close personal connections with a teacher, for example, through office hours has been really positive. But for many kids, it is really challenging for our youngest children, for our children with special needs, for our students who are learning English as a second language, and particularly those at the very early stages of English acquisition. Remote learning is very challenging. We also know that it's been incredibly challenging for many of our families. We can provide Chromebooks, we can provide access to the internet, but when we are not there with our students, it can be really hard for some families to be able to support their students with remote learning. So our goal is absolutely to return to in-person learning as soon as we can do so safely. We've been working, as I mentioned, with our local health experts on a dashboard that would help guide decision-making by looking at multiple factors with COVID-19 to help ensure that conditions are safe, that we have protocols to keep students and teachers and all district employees safe, and to do so in a way that really prioritizes a slow, gradual, safe return to in-person instruction.
Thank you so much. I'll say for us to have an idea about this coming school year. So we also have Jennifer, the board of director in DPS, and thank you so much for being here. Similar question to you as somebody that voted into policy and everything that happened. So how has it been at the board level dealing with this pandemic, and what involvement the board will have this coming year to address some of the needs of the student?
Well, that's really interesting. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Bacon. I want to say hi to my good old friend at the end here. I represent Northeast Denver, or District 4, in the Denver Public School Board. And I want to say thank you so much to our partners that are on this call, and a very big thank you to our superintendent, because you led with some of the decisions that you voted on. And I'd like to say we didn't make many decisions. You know, I think part of this conversation about responding to COVID has really actually uncovered layers of government, right? And different authorities when it comes to making decisions around education, and what our role is as representatives of our district, which is the majority of our students are free and reduced lunch. The majority of our students are students of color. That we lean in with our values and our experiences to remind those around us the impact of the decisions that they're making. And so it was really important for Denver Public Schools to say flat out, here are our values when managing this pandemic that were deeply rooted in equity and equality. Those are two different things, but when appropriate, we wanted to remind folks of that. So when the pandemic was hitting, public schools were the last to close. You know, the universities shut down because of the role K-12 public education plays in community. We are shelter for a lot of students. We are the source of food for a lot of students. We're the source of resources, mental health support, checking in on students' well-being. And so those values did not leave us on top of our responsibilities for public education, and on top of our responsibilities to all of the people we employ who are integral parts of the community as well. Because what we do there could be disruptive to families and their children go to DPS. And so what the board did was say, we will lead with a realization of these values. And you heard our superintendent say, we prioritized technology. We prioritized being able to feed our community. At this point, Denver Public Schools provide meals not just for its students, but their families. And the board said, you know what, as we go through this pandemic, we are going to focus on three things. So we had to make certain topics priorities. So the Denver Public School Board created 3 crisis priorities. The first is to ensure that all of our students and staff are physically safe. The second is to ensure all of our students and staff are supported with socio-emotional supports, as well as mental health supports, because the processing of this pandemic on families, and I'll also get to the communal impact, is really important. And the third was to prioritize mitigating learning loss. And that means we need to pay additional, strong, all those adjective words, attention to our students who are English language learners, who are already needed to be supported with intervention academically. And so that is a priority of this district. And to figure out how to do that has been, in a lot of ways, very easy because we all share the same values. But the challenges have been coming from all the agencies that tell us to do different things, and then figuring out actual resources, capacities, and whatnot. And so the great thing we did was we prioritized it, which means that's where we're going to shift all of our work. I will say on the second priority, that the way that it impacts learning loss, I represent Northeast Denver, and one of the highest reported neighborhood with highest reported cases of COVID is Montbello. And so when we think about education, our families are in somewhat of a dissonance. And you all know, when you are trying to think about the safety of your kids, you care deeply about what they're exposed to, but then our families are highly exposed to the quote unquote societal requirements of them, in that they have to go to work. So what does it mean if we know in-person works best for supporting our students? Because we are actually concerned about how many 5 and 6-year-olds don't have access to someone to teach them how to read. And so you have families who want to keep their kids home, but also have to go to work. And we have to figure out all those resources that students are getting. So we are in an institutional quagmire. But the good thing is that I hope all of our communities understand is the role that public education plays in our daily lives. You know, beyond the childcare space, into the resources and into the educational space. And now we're thinking about our commitment to equity and equality is to ensure all children, whether or not they're in DPS, if they want to come, we would love everyone, have access to a quality education. And that's getting harder to do when different families are going into pods, you know, figure out all of those things, because now we don't know where all of our kids are in the city with their learning. And I want people to kind of think about that for a little bit. Not everyone has equitable access to resources to provide a great education. And I love our parents, but I had a conversation with someone yesterday who was like, teach me how to teach my kids quadratics, you know, because some of the things that we have to teach, teaching reading is not just, you know, there's something to that. And so now we are all together as an entire community really evaluating public education and what it means on a community level to ensure that everyone has access and opportunities, even when they may or may not be able to afford it, even when they have to go to work. But also, what does it mean for the role of schools with being able to support and keep our communities safe and healthy? And so we have to answer all of that on 2-week cycles. And that's really difficult. So again, high five to, you know, to the Bill Kurtzes and the Susanna Cordovas, because it is really difficult to navigate what you want to do as well as reality of what our society has set us up for with needs to survive, get paid, find food, and learn. So I just wanted to add that lens to this too. As we talk about equity and equality, it's also outside of the building. And the relationship to that, to learning, is key, that all of us have to figure out how to manage and integrate into what it is that we can do for students, their families, and our communities.
Thank you, Jennifer. And again, the theme of this year, Afrik Impact, the value in our common voice. And that's how we value different opinion, different perspective, and together we can come with a better perspective for defining the quality education of our children. So Senator Lundin, you mentioned here that last year, so $13 billion was spent from all sources on K-12 in public education in Colorado. That's a lot of money. Could you tell us, because obviously when this budget was voted in, most likely it did not take into consideration the COVID-19. So was some of this money reallocated to COVID-19? And for this year budget, is there some money that they're looking to allocate with the situation that the community is facing to address some of the issue we have when it comes to the education of our children?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of big issues in that. The numbers, actually, that's the last audited figures we have are for 16-17. So it's a little bit dated information. But in 16-17, we spent $13.5 billion, all sources in K-12 public education in Colorado. So this is at a state level, and it works out to, there were about 860,000 students at that point. So it works out to about $15,700 per student. Again, all sources. That's debt, that's buildings, capital, operations, everything. So the point in that is we as a society choose through multiple levels of taxation, local money, state money, we choose to spend a significant amount of money on public education. That's good. We need to invest. That's one thing I argue for constantly down at the Capitol. Let's spend our money where we're investing for the future of Colorado, as opposed to spending our money where we're consuming for today. So the big question is, how do we choose to do that? Now, to your direct question is, was additional COVID money provided? The federal government kicked in about $570 million to the state of Colorado, and the governor passed that on through. It's still in the process of being allocated. So there was additional money flowed into the system to respond to COVID. At the same time, because of the economic contraction, our public policy response to COVID was essentially to shut the economy down. Well, when the economy shuts down, the taxes that would have been collected don't get paid. And so the money from the state and from local governments that would have flowed into public education, that was curtailed as well. As it worked out, the $570 million coming in from the federal government was just about, not quite as much as the cuts that were made at the state level. So there's two elements. There's the question of, what are the policy choices we're making? How do we want to spend our money, that money which we have, and what does that policy look like? And I would argue we're learning a lot about how to respond so that we meet individual needs in this time, and it's putting a lot of pressure on systems. The board member Bacon was absolutely correct. I mean, I think your direct quote was, we are in an institutional quagmire. This is incredibly challenging for all of our existing institutions. The challenge I lay down is, yes, let's come together, let's work together, let's do the best we can with what we have in terms of institutions, in terms of processes, in terms of resources and dollars to get through COVID, but let's learn from this experience. And the question that Mr. Miles laid before us in his opening remarks is the prescient question. What are we going to do after COVID? And I'm arguing, let's learn. And one of the things that's clear, that's a significant challenge, is the children of affluent parents are navigating well because their parents have the resource, the capacity. They're forming pods. They're doing things that are different to respond to the health needs, the public safety needs, the child safety needs, and at the same time prevent the child from falling behind. I would say we need to figure out ways, either through the existing system or fund it differently, move the money differently perhaps, to allow all students access to that level of nimble learning opportunities, of customized learning opportunities, the things that are specifically of the need of the child and the parents, as opposed to the need of the system. And this is very, very challenging. When you have a $13.5 billion industry, it says, don't change me. I like it just the way I am. And my argument is, there's 900,000 children out there. They're the ones we should be most concerned for. And we should be willing to take the challenges and make the challenging changes if at the end of the day, the job is about serving those students as opposed to serving a system.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. And I would like to bring Bill again. And Bill, you mentioned that building relationship is more important than ever. At the head of DSST, could you tell us, what does it look like? Because sometimes we hear a lot of politics between charter school, public school, district, elected official. Could you elaborate a little bit when it comes to that building relationship you're talking about, and how does it look like?
Thanks for that question, Papa D. And I think it is an important conversation. And I think, certainly when we get into a national crisis and a local crisis like we're in now, it does raise those questions. And, I think first and foremost, as School Board Member Bacon has said, and as our Superintendent Susanna has said, this is a crisis that's affecting the entire city, and certainly the most vulnerable. And we as adults, I think, have choices to make in that. Do we find a collective way to work together on their behalf, or do we let what I would say the politics of division and the politics of adults get in the way of serving our students and families the way we all know we need to do? And so, DSST has always, always prioritized creating a collaborative relationship with the districts we work with, and that's true both here in Denver and in Aurora. And how to, I think it's very, very important that we as a collection of adults prioritize how we work together to maximize our impact for students. And so I think that that's really important. And I think that the most important thing I think we can do as a system is to agree upon, the ends and the focus of what we're trying to do together for our students and families, and then everybody do their part in that process to ensure that families are getting fed, that families are getting supported with their technology access, that families are getting the health care that they need and the support that they need through this pandemic. And so I think that the governance question is really a question of us, as adults trying to put aside those things to do our best to serve the students and families that live in our communities. And I think that, more than ever, and I think, School Board Member Bacon said this well, like more than ever, like we need to make sure that every child is getting a high quality education. And that's not an easy task right now, but that is the call before us, is to certainly provide for the basic needs as best we can as a school district to support, the health and the access and all that. But more than anything, when you look at the generation of students right now, and certainly to Senator's point earlier, like this could be a couple-year process to work out of the pandemic. And we know from research, we know that when students have disrupted learning for a significant period of time, in many cases, when you layer on the systemic injustice of our society on top of that, we're talking about students who never recover. And we have to address the reality that we could be looking at a lost generation unless we have the courage to work together and to simply look at each other as adults who lead these systems and say, how can we all best make sure and do our part to ensure that every child in Denver, every child in Aurora has access to a high quality education that we know is high quality. And where there are high quality options, how do we ensure that they get to those and that they are served well? And when we're not serving students and families well, how do we address that? Because if we don't, 2 years from now, we're going to look back and say literally a generation of American children, and to the Senator's point, primarily children of color and children in communities that don't have as much access, are going to suffer a long-term impact because of our inability to answer that simple question of how do we all work together to make sure all kids have a high quality education. So I think it's really important that we put aside those differences at this moment and focus on that singular question of how do we find those opportunities for children, how do we have them access them, how do we get more kids into those options, so that this next couple of years can be a time of gap closing, not a time of gap creating.
Thank you so much, Bill. And let me bring in Rachel, that's here with Tatenda, working with, she's with Wildflower. So I just want to ask a question here, because we mentioned here being a community-driven school position, Flame Lily to be responsive to the specific needs based on COVID-19. Could you elaborate a little bit, and also how Montessori going to mirror the African traditional education system? That's a very interesting point. Maybe Tatenda will elaborate on that. So if you can talk about a little bit how Montessori could be responsive to the specific need based on COVID-19.
Sure, thanks, Papa. It's an honor to be here. And I'll start just by telling everyone a little bit about what is Wildflower. So Wildflower is an ecosystem of teacher-led, community-driven, authentic micro Montessori schools that are designed to serve racially and socioeconomically diverse groups of students. So Wildflower exists specifically to make authentic Montessori available to all families, regardless of background or income levels. I saw a question come through the chat about how we make Montessori available to all. So the first question is, how do we make it available to all families? And at the early childhood level, like the school that Tatenda is proposing to start in Aurora, we do that by accessing public subsidies. So the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program, as well as the Colorado Preschool Program, and we stack those subsidies to make preschool free or nearly free for low-income families. And then at the older grades, we have teacher leaders that are founding and leading charter schools. So we actually are open to all different governance models depending upon the needs of the community and the vision that the teacher has for the community that they will serve. So the second part of that question is, how do we make authentic Montessori schools accessible to teachers who have a unique vision for starting their own school? And the answer to that is Wildflower provides resources for the teachers to be able to start their school. So my job as a partner in Colorado is to remove the barriers for entrepreneurs like Tatenda to be able to open their own micro Montessori schools. And so that is about being able to provide financial resources to start the school, being able to provide back office support systems that streamline being able to hybridize the teacher and administrative roles, and then also being able to provide access to those founding teacher leaders to a network of small teacher-led Montessori schools across the country, and knowing that those other teacher leaders who have come before them are each other's best resources in this journey. So one of the ways in which we feel like we're responsive to COVID, we actually haven't had to change very much about our model, because when we say micro school, we actually mean one-room schoolhouses. So our teacher leaders design schools for 25 to 30 students at full capacity, 10 to 15 students to start. So these schools are super small and very nimble. And they're designed to be responsive to community needs. And then the other piece of that is what I mentioned earlier around the hybridized teacher leader role. So our teachers are the decision makers for their schools. They are the administrators, which is what enables them to truly customize the learning experience for all students. And Tatenda explained Montessori, I thought, so eloquently earlier, but the Montessori methodology is designed to follow the child. So to the senator's point about truly being able to give families access to choosing the model that is in the best interest of their kids and their unique assets and challenges and desires, when you layer the fact that the Montessori methodology is rooted in the student-centeredness of the pedagogy, along with a very, very small learning environment, we haven't really had to make too many adaptations to our model to be responsive to the challenges posed by COVID. And I'll pass it to Tatenda to talk about how the school is uniquely positioned to serve an African immigrant community.
Thank you, Rachel. Like I said before, that Montessori is nothing but the story of all people, and I meant it in all its true meaning. If you look at something that is very unique to Montessori is the mixed age classroom, where we are going to have a school for 2.5-year-olds to 6 in one classroom learning together. So Montessori, we believe that the little ones learn from the older ones, as the older ones learn from the little ones, as they refine their skills and share what they have learned. And this is one thing that we know that is very common in African culture, where we are learning together. We come together as a community to learn. We have the little ones learning from their parents, and the parents learning from their parents, and the elders who are eager to always share the knowledge. So there's that exchange of knowledge that's happening in a community. So in the true sense of coming together in a community, which is what Montessori fosters in a classroom of mixed age group, is one thing that is very common to the African community, and that they will resonate with. I remember when I was in Beijing in 2009, when I first got introduced to Montessori, it was something that just took me back to how I grew up in Zimbabwe. So I'm saying that this school is going to be something that the community is going to relate with, because if you've grown up in Africa and if you're African, you know very well how you were raised, how we believe strongly that community is what fosters learning. We have to come together. It takes a village. We don't learn in isolation. They don't learn in isolation. So that coming together in this age group is something that is very unique to Montessori, and yet is something that us as Africans have known for education for our children. And one thing too that I also want to stress is the idea of nurturing the spirit, which is what Montessori education also focuses on, the cosmic task, the cosmic education, and how African traditional system, when a child is born, there's sacredness that comes with having a newborn, with having a child. The idea that they possess this hidden talents that are just waiting to be shown, that are just waiting to be nurtured and cultivated. And we were saying that having a Montessori environment that has teachers who are professionally trying to sustain and support that intrinsic motivation to learn is something that we as Africans and as a community in Aurora have known for our children, that they have some uniqueness that they have. It's only an environment that they need that is set up for them to be successful, and that is set up for them to be able to show their talents, to be able to be who they are uniquely, differently, and yet appreciating those differences. So I think when I look at my story as an African and what Montessori is nothing new. If there's anything, it is just like a return to what we have known about education, what we have known about raising children. So we are going to be providing an environment where our Black and Brown and children from low-income communities are represented. They are seen and they feel seen in the classroom, because the curriculum has to be informed and based on anti-bias, anti-racist education curricula, where we are saying that we need to validate their experience. We need to validate their culture and their experiences. So really, Papa, there isn't any differences. If there's anything, Montessori is African culture in a learning environment that is labeled Montessori.
Thank you so much. And as you can see, we have a lot of questions that's coming to the screen. I want to make sure also we have time to read a couple of questions. I'll go to Dr. Terry. Here, you mentioned accountability. Could you tell us a little bit, what does it look like, and how people at all levels, when it comes to our kids' education, will be held accountable? And if they are not performing at level expected, what should be the action taken? Please, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent question. And I think that's the question every educator is asking ourselves right now is, how do we measure accountability or, the performance of a school and performance of students? But we have, we've been working on this for a while before we ran into the issue of COVID, in terms of looking at model specific measures, looking at our Montessori schools, for instance, and really some comparability among Montessori schools, and looking at a trajectory of a Montessori student compared to another Montessori student. We have 15 different school models, and so we really wanted to bring those models together and do some comparative analysis that way. So one thing we do with our portfolio is we have mission specific measures, and so schools have missions, and then it's like, how well are you performing against the mission that you've established, and and what measures do we use to kind of determine the quality of the education you're providing. So we look at that, we look at school models, we look at interim assessments, and we work with our schools to say, you have to be, you need to ensure that our students are learning, and they're learning in a way that's going to move them forward and prepare them for the next level. And so there are different ways to do it other than just state assessments. We've become pretty reliant on that. And so we are being very flexible to look at different ways of doing that, but accountability is not going to go away. And it's just impossible. We have to ensure that schools are meeting the needs of students academically, And then we also want to make sure they're accountable financially and operationally as well. That's important. But we need to ensure that our students are learning and moving forward. And so we're not giving up on accountability. We revised how we're doing things. For instance, and I'll just tell you this real quickly, our schools go through a renewal process, and a renewal process where you really evaluate the school as they move into a new contract and see if they're going to be granted another contract. We didn't do away with the renewal process in the midst of COVID. We revised it. And so we made revisions. In fact, later today, we're going to hear from our schools, and they're going to do presentations to our board on how well they're performing, how well they're responding to COVID. But accountability doesn't go away in the midst of this. It just looks differently.
Thank you so much. And I'll go to Superintendent. One thing that, a couple of questions that came through during the first panel was around mental health. Could you talk about, in this current situation with online learning, and what the district has in place when it comes to addressing the mental health of students will be facing through the pandemic era?
Sure, it's super important. So let me talk both about what we do proactively and then what we do when we know that there are students who are dealing with more issues or are in a crisis situation. So I couldn't agree more with what has been shared around the power of connections. And so we are very much emphasizing the importance of relationships and connections as a proactive way to support the mental health needs of our students. It's a stressful time for everyone. And many of our children are working from home in an environment that is very different than it would look like in school. I've had teachers talk to me about how when they have office hours, they have kids come to their office hours not to ask any questions, but just so that while they're doing their work by themselves, they can look up and see a grown-up who is right there with them. And sometimes we'll participate in office hours for 2 hours and maybe ask one question, but they really are craving that connection. So we very much are emphasizing the importance of using live time in instruction, both in a virtual environment and when we are hopefully back in our buildings, to support the social emotional learning that we know is going to help our students persevere and be resilient during this time. But we also know that this has brought out many mental health concerns that our students are grappling with. And so I'd like to share a few of the things that we are doing to continue to support our students. So all of our mental health providers are school-based social workers, psychologists, all of those support teams, restorative practices coordinators are continuing to work with students while we're in remote instruction. That we think is really important. We continue to do things like monitor our student email system. People may not know that all of our students have a DPS email address, and we have an automated system that reviews all student emails, and anytime anything is referenced in a student's email through our system that talks about self-harm, suicide, violence, threats, we actually investigate. And we actually even send people straight to children's homes so that we can intervene very quickly if there's a crisis that's happening, and we learn about it through our email system. We continue to work with our school-based health clinics, and we have both opportunities for families to have virtual meetings as well as live meetings. Those have continued since we went into remote in March. And we think it's really important. The mental health visits that our students need are available through our school-based health clinics. And so I would encourage everyone, if you know that you have a student who's experiencing the impact of trauma, who is grappling with mental health issues, please reach out to us. We have lots of different ways that we can support our children, in addition to the proactive supports that we will be focusing on to start the school year.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. And I'll bring Jennifer here. One of the things that the first panelists talk about is, and the student and the parents, please don't overlook us when it comes to making decisions on our behalf. Could you talk about if there's any current partnership or a process the board is using to engage with students or parents to grab their opinion and include it into the work they're doing Or what would you like to see, or how could we establish this collaboration and partnership into redefining the quality education of our children?
I think that's an excellent question. I think Denver Public Schools has certainly been pushed lately by our students to make very deep and impactful change, from everything to our conversation around police presence in schools to our curriculum. Is it culturally responsive? Are they reflected? We have a group of students at a school that have been unrelenting in demanding that they see themselves reflected in what they're learning. And so shout out to the students at Dr. Martin Luther King Early College. And so I think it's something that we could probably do better. I think throughout the COVID experience, however, the district has been very adamant about putting out surveys to parents. Our family and community engagement team will call families to ask them questions on everything from what do you need to what is your take on return to school. I think it's something that we could probably learn from to figure out how do we move from here those outreach systems. We do have formalized spaces for our students to really engage with us. We have our student voice and leadership team, our student board of education. Board members have really strong relationships with groups from YASPA to Project Voice to Colorado Youth Congress, so much so that the youth presidents have really pushed me in all the resolutions I've written around Black Excellence Resolution, and again, everything from equity and equality around teachers. So one of the things that I'll just end with in saying, beyond kind of like our survey outreach system, our proactive calls, we've set up our websites, particularly for families to easily navigate on COVID questions. We've got a few formal spaces with students, but I think we can do more. And I think it's rightfully so that we talk to them. We heard from a lot of students in the spring, the class of 2020, my mask usually says class of 2020, because their experience with this has been so, I mean, there are not words to express the pricelessness of understanding what they went through. And we have to do everything that we can to better support our students. And so we are thinking about the class of 2021 and what this means for them. And we're also thinking about the newest students that entered DPS, our 5-year-olds. And if we do not have relationships with our families, we will not know what's going on. There is no way to do education without having relationships right now. So I, again, just think this is something that we will learn from and get better at, but it is not something that can be ignored as a matter of function, but also as a matter of our values.
Thank you so much. Now I'll go through the question here, and anybody that want to chime in, feel free. But we got a lot of questions, and I promised that people that send their question, if we don't get a chance to answer your question, we'll send it via email. But the first question that came in is, how are we using equity as a lens as we rethink school? How are we using equity as a lens as we rethink school? Senator?
Thank you very much, Papa Dia. And I'll just pause to say thank you so much for this opportunity to participate in this conversation. Appreciate it so deeply. So the most granular method of measuring anything in the world essentially is dollars, or whatever the local currency is. How are you allocating to it? And my argument is we're not doing a very good job, frankly, of allocating those dollars in a way that generates equity. We need to meet students where they arrive to our schools, or where they arrive into our societal contract with them, to help them achieve what they will be able to do, to help them aspire to who they hope to become. And we are not allocating those dollars in a way that supports equity. And the information, and we just, boy, this is like a 3-day seminar we need to have. The information is so challenging. In 2019, just one quick data point, 30% of 6th graders met or exceeded the expectations in math, 30% of 6th graders. But 13% of African-American sixth graders met or exceeded the math expectations. That means we're failing 87%. But we're not just failing the 87% who don't meet or exceed the math expectations. We're failing everyone. We're failing all the students in the school. We're failing as a society when we don't reach out and achieve that. So the pin I want to put in the conversation is, I offer all the encouragement I can offer to those people in public education today who are fighting their way through the incredible difficulties that the coronavirus has thrown at us. They're doing the best they can. I encourage you, I support you, I praise you, and I thank you for the work you're doing. And I want to put a pin in the conversation. Let's think about where we go as we come out of coronavirus. Can we make an adjustment that helps us move forward to a superior system with greater equity and attention to every student as a precious human being in the circumstance in which they find themselves? Or are we going to strain to go backwards to the system, the process, the jobs that we all had before? I'm challenging us. Let's go forward. Let's build equity. Let's honor students. Let's meet them as individuals, as precious human beings, where they are arriving and seeking our help as they are learning and growing into human beings, into hopefully fully formed human beings. So, Papa, I got a little speechy on that one. I'm sorry.
No,
but it truly is something I'm passionate about. Thank you.
Thank you so
Can I
much.
add a little bit, Papa, also from what the Senator is
Yeah, if
sharing?
you can keep it very short, I will get to the next question, please.
That as we move forward and as we make it more equitable, let us not forget the little ones, because often many times we are forgetting our little children, that they also need, you know, education. And Montessori education was saying that it has to be available for them, and parents need to have, like what Dr. Terry said and my colleague, let's have choices that they can choose into Montessori school. They can choose into all these models. I think that's where we can also start. Like, can we make it more accessible so that we have it for our families and for the little ones as well?
Thank you. And I'll take this question, and it could go to Superintendent or Bill or Dr. Lewis. How will we keep kids physically active during virtual class time? How do we teach reading from a distance? Anybody, Bill, Dr. Lewis, or Superintendent?
I'll take a quick shot, and Tara, you can probably do a better job than I can. But yeah, I mean, I think from a perspective of physical education, I mean, I think it's just important to build in those routines into a school day. And one of the things we're very clear about is we can't have kids, you know, in front of a screen all day. And so while we are running a full school day, I mean, I don't believe, to my point earlier, that if we're going to get a year's worth of learning of all students, that we can be teaching for 3 hours a day. So we are running a full school day online. And we have to really be cognizant of what that means in a given class period, and making sure that kids are getting up and around and moving and not in front of the screen the whole time, and that there's active learning going on, not in front of a camera. So I think that's one thing that we've thought a lot about, is how do we not sacrifice learning time by having a short day, but how do we incorporate movement in during that 6 hour day from home. Secondly, I think, you know, there's probably on the reading side, that there is no more important, I think, reality than focusing on making sure that the curriculum that you're using is high quality and that your teachers are well trained in it. Because if you do not have that, it's very hard, because you're not there with them every day to be reimagining or changing the curriculum that's in front of students in a way that's much easier to do in person. And so, you know, clearly we have to do small groups within classes at times and really focus on small groups of students. But I just would say, and we've spent a lot of time on this, making sure, one, that we have a very strong curriculum in front of our students, and two, that we're diagnosing very rapidly every week how well students are progressing, so that we can then do small group pullout with students who, from a reading perspective particularly, are not making the progress they need to make. And if you don't do those assessments and you don't have the ability to really understand as quickly as you need to then find support and create smaller groups of students to help them succeed.
Thank you so much, Bill. And
And Papa D, I apologize. I have to jump off at this point, but I just want to thank you for a great conversation this morning. And I really appreciate your leadership, and thanks for including me.
Thank you for joining us, Bill. Thank you. And at this point, we just wanted to take time, maybe a minute for closing remark, but thank you so much. So Dr. Terry, yes, a couple of words for closing remark, and thank you for being among us this morning.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciated this. What an honor to be part of this experience, you know, and just for 30 seconds tell you a little bit about, you know, our schools again, that I think incorporating, you know, movement is so critical, and for certain models, Montessori being one of them, but Waldorf and project-based learning, expositionary learning, many models that already have that as part of their learning experience and can be outdoors and are doing that. And so if a school hasn't done that, they can learn from schools that have been doing it. And same thing with reading. We have quite a bit of research and knowledge about what works and how to teach in an online environment. We have to learn from what those that have come before us and adapt quickly. But as Bill said, you need to make sure that your teachers have the training they need to do it well. But I know that we have the capacity as educators and parents working together to do this. It's not going to be easy. It hasn't been easy, but somehow we're going to learn how to be better educators through this whole experience. So thank you again for letting me be part of it.
Thank you so much for being among us. So Superintendent, please. Maybe Susanna might have drop off. So I'll go back. Rachel, last word, please.
Sure. Thank you again for including me. I think I'll just add one more thing about Montessori. I'm just not sure how familiar our audience is with Montessori. I know that I didn't know anything about Montessori until I had my first child, and I started to research different methodology. But you know, Montessori is founded on this belief that all kids are naturally curious, peaceful, and good, and is rooted in this idea that kids should be their own guides for learning. And that, you know, Montessori focuses on developing an intrinsic motivation and a natural love for learning that is expressed through their own curiosities and their own interests. And that part of what that does is it enables our students to be independent thinkers and to build a high level of self-awareness. And so the independence that Montessori kids develop enables them to move from virtual learning settings to in-person settings seamlessly. And so we have some data from one of our partner schools, Denver Montessori High School, which is an innovation school in Denver Public Schools, that demonstrates how well that particular school community was able to transition through the COVID period without any learning loss and continue their success because of that independence that Montessori fosters that set them up for success as virtual learners.
Thank you. Yes, Senator. Please.
I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this, and I look forward to rejoining the conversation at a time when we're not all wearing masks.
Yes, I know. Tatenda.
Thank you, Papa. Yeah, the same with what Rachel has shared. I just want to quote one of my favorite writings from Maria Montessori, which says, "The child is both the future and the hope." So I feel like we have the vision and the mission already. So we have to work with the framework of that knowledge. And one thing that I'm excited about is just that Wildflower already has that mission and those principles that we can work with in bringing Montessori and making it more accessible. And I'm excited that we in Aurora, we're going to be having a school that will represent our children and serve our children.
Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer, please, closing remark.
Well, I will say on behalf of a school district, we laid out the challenges that we're all facing. And the one thing that I would like to leave folks with as we navigate through this and think about the future is to remember what equity and equality means and remember what that looks like all the way through. We have to remember how we got into spaces where there were gaps. And we have to be mindful in this moment. It is really hard to discern between what do I do for myself and my family and what do we do for community. And sometimes choosing too much of one or the other gets us right back to places we've been before. And I don't want to, kind of end on a negative note. I just wanted to remind people that the way that we have to think about what it is that we are seeing is in a very multifaceted way, and reminders of what it is that we actually learned about equality and equity in the first place, so that we don't exacerbate the issues, which in the most terrible of circumstances, which is self-preservation, right? And so I say that to say that, yes, we have opportunities for choices in XYZ, but let's think about the kids who don't sometimes, right? And what is it that we tried to put together with public education in the first place? We committed to having a literate society. And so we have to ensure that that is still happening for all kids. And that also means we have to understand the experiences that our families are facing that may not be a singular one. And so I just wanted to end on that note for us all to think about as we take care of ourselves, but also as we take care of our communities. It is so heartbreaking that families have to figure out how to educate their kids. But what does it mean to check on your neighbor, to see if someone's tutoring him or her, to see if school's operating, and which we can check to be sure every 5-year-old learns how to read this year. And so on behalf of public school people and the Denver School Board, I just wanted to share that, because that's what some of us are wrestling with, but we need you to participate in that conversation too. So we don't make lopsided decisions, but we are thinking about as many people as possible.
Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. And to let you know, this concludes our panel conversation, but this does not end the conversation. And to let you know also, on behalf of the African Leadership Group and the entire community, you have no choice but to partner and collaborate with us. Because we will be there, and we're not going to come alone. We're going to come with our students. We're going to come with our mothers and fathers. Everybody in the community will show we want this collaboration. We want to embrace this collaboration. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We have community leaders. We are preparing to testify at the Capitol. We are getting our parents to show up at the board of directors. We are getting community members to be teachers, to open school. It shows you our dedication and our commitment to this process. As you hear from Miriam, as you hear from Beth, please do not count us out. Include us in the conversation. So I want to let everybody know we have lunch downstairs, and Clovis wanted me to let you know also he had the banner, so he will be taking pictures as well. But also to let you know, the celebration keeps going on Thursday. We have a very, very important conversation, and we have the governor that's going to be joining us as a speaker, and we have Betsy Marquis that's going to be joining us as the keynote speaker. And the theme is how to build sustainable, winning, and competitive business culture post-COVID-19. We have the entire business committee led by Solomon Mwanga, and we have amazing speakers. It's going to be Thursday here, but also virtually. So please, if you have not registered, please do so. And also we have the community evening of healing Saturday. And again, it's going to be a lot of fun. As I mentioned earlier, we have an artist that joined us from Africa that flew in, an amazing and very popular artist. And we also have drum performance. So it's going to be a very beautiful, again, you need to register in order to attend. So thank you to our keynote speaker, Lydia, that was very inspirational. So we are very honored to have you. But I would not conclude today without really thanking the mighty team of the African Leadership Group, led by Laurie, Usman, Amadou, Dr. Everybody. Amazing job. So thank you so much, all the panelists. People that are following us online, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday. I want to give a shout out to my nephew, Pa Issa, that's following all the way from Rhode Island. I see you, young man, and I'll reach out to you. Thank you so much, and let's enjoy lunch, and thank you again. Everybody enjoy your day.